Welcome back to Young Married Christian. We are on a mission to see a gospel-centered home made available for every single child in the foster care system.
Because the Bible made us do it. Nope. None of that.
And in this episode, Debo talks to Ruslan.
We're going to talk about some real life stuff.
YouTuber, rapper, producer. He's got almost 100,000 followers. He probably will have 100,000 subscribers on YouTube by the time you're hearing this.
Nothing instantly grows.
He's incredible. I've been binge listening to his YouTube content for probably the better half of the last 4 or 5 months. Debo had an incredible conversation with him.
The interview was absolutely lit. So lit that we talked about the time that Ruslan got lit.
I don't smoke.
By taking edibles and
getting on an airplane.
This is a very strict plane.
We talk about that story and then also his views on marijuana and how they play a part in Christianity. Spice up your life!
Debo also talked to Ruslan about cancel culture. He specifically talked about the situation going on with DaBaby right now. If you've got your finger on the pulse of pop culture, you probably know what we're talking about, but if you don't, you will after you listen to this interview.
He's had quite a few scuffles.
It was absolutely incredible. We tried something totally different this time. At the end of the interview, we went live on Instagram with Ruslan's followers and took questions and feedback from them and used them. And we even got to talk about his views on sexuality.
Some of y'all keep getting them booty calls.
And then even dived into birth control and LGBTQ plus community.
It was wild. We also talked about Ruslan's thoughts on the really popular podcast right now called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill that documents, just like the name says, the rise and fall of Mark Driscoll's former church, Mars Hill. So you're absolutely going to want to listen to this entire conversation. It was incredible.
So hold on to your prayer beads, Sharon, because we are young, married, and I really want to say, Christian. So stupid. $20 for a drink. And then if you throw your poncho away in the trash can, they actually get sucked down into the tunnels of Disney and they resell them. And repack. No, I'm kidding.
I was like, I was more intrigued by the tunnels of Disney. I was like, is there really tunnels underneath this?
No, there are.
Really?
So when you're at Magic Kingdom, you're on the second level of the park.
No.
There is a whole city underneath you.
What?
Yeah.
Like a city?
It's how the characters get from point A to point B without.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed. You never see cowboys in Tomorrowland. You never see Space Rangers in Fantasyland. Yeah. So they all come from beneath and they come up. It's like if you've ever seen the movie Us, the Jordan Peele horror movie.
Yeah. No, wait, no.
Well, if you ever watch it, it's similar to that when you're down there. It's kind of like
no, I never saw
not enough
Us.
lighting.
I saw the other one. What was the other horror
Get Out?
movie he did? Get Out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to see Us. But
Did you see Happily Ever After last night?
No. What's Happily Ever After again?
The fireworks show?
Oh, yeah, I saw the fireworks show. Yes. I didn't know it was called Happily Ever After. Yes, saw the fireworks show. That was dope.
It's really good.
That was dope. My son was on my neck, and now my neck hurts. So there's that. It was fine. At one point, I was pushing the stroller with him on my neck, the baby in the stroller with my backpack on. And I looked at my wife, and I said, what do I pay you for? You know.
Well, and I was thinking in my head, what's different about us and Disneyland? I always know what you guys have that we don't, but I don't necessarily know what we have that you guys don't. So my thought was, fill our magic, we have it, you don't, and the fireworks, we have it, and you don't.
I thought we had fireworks.
Well, you don't have, I don't think Happily Ever After. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah.
So your guy, it's a lot of the same stuff. Ariel was identical. A lot of the same stuff. The park is just bigger and better.
The castle.
Yeah, the castle is really dope.
Disneyland's castle feels like.
Yeah. I feel like when you see Disneyland's castle, you're just kind of like, well, I guess when they finish it, it'll be big. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's cute.
Cool. The lighting is really dope. Your guys' Main Street is really dope. The ferry is really cool. I would say it was like you could tell they built Anaheim before they built Magic Kingdom.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's big differences, East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah.
I'm even curious, okay, after church on a Sunday and you have to go through a drive-through, where are you going? Because I know In-N-Out?
In-N-Out.
That was immediate.
In-N-Out. Well, yeah, I mean, like the other night, I'm like, we last night we leave and we're like, oh, like we don't want to stay there and get food and pay $200 a plate. So we're like, gosh. And then we're like, they don't have In-N-Out here. Like, what are we gonna eat? You know, they don't have In-N-Out.
So what'd you have to resort to?
We went back to Disney Springs and went to the House of Blues. Yep, it's good. Wait, are we recording? This is the podcast.
Huh? Welcome, man.
Okay.
You're here. He's like, wait a second. I feel a podcast coming.
You bamboozled me.
No. Well, I mean, our listeners know that I have a love for White Castle. It's unhealthy. Ooh. And I was thinking the other day that when I say that, because our first 4 episodes just dropped.
Yeah.
So this is like the first time I'm doing one of these after people have heard what we've been doing and have given me feedback. And so I've heard like, Debo, people are going to peg you as a stoner because you keep talking about White Castle. And the truth is, I've never smoked weed in my life. Not that I've like ever not considered it or anything, but then I was thinking, because I feel like weed is just becoming normalized, and we see it a lot. So I'm curious what your stance is on weed, because as somebody who's rocking tattoos, you're a rapper. Like where do you see weed?
Well, first of all, is White Castle as bad as Whataburger?
In what sense?
Just every measurable metric under the sun.
So they call them sliders because they go in and they slide straight through you. So if you're talking nutritional value, yes, it's way worse.
Okay.
I
don't think I've had White Castles. I've only had Whataburger, and I was like, this and Tex-Mex, like this is what you guys are excited about. And then at that point, I realized I could never live anywhere else besides Southern California. It's like
because you see what everyone else in the country is
like
eating.
Tex-Mex, like Whataburger, like really, and I just feel like such a snob.
Yeah, and we wake up with biscuits and gravy so that we can have our concrete mix inside of us to slow us down, so that we don't have to stress out about life. So it's like that plus White Castle. I don't know how anyone's even alive in the South.
It's wild, dude. It's yes. Shout out to the COVID rate in Orlando. Freaked me out. I was like, holy smokes, 89, like it's like triple what it is in Southern California, which is like high. And I was like, holy smokes. And then they're like, yeah, but if you're healthy, you're gonna be fine. And I'm like, 40% of the population is morbidly obese according to the CDC. Like, what?
We don't listen to them here in Florida.
Apparently.
You know, everyone is judging Florida, yet everyone's here on vacation. You know, it's like, how dare Florida and their COVID rate?
Yeah.
I guess we're going to Orlando next week.
Orlando, yeah, man. Yeah, so it's really nice here. But cannabis, medical cannabis. So I don't smoke. I don't smoke anything. But when I had knee surgery, the doctors were trying to give me opioids. About 2 years ago, I had a minor procedure on my knee, but it was, traumatic enough where I needed painkillers. And they tried to give me hydrocodone or whatever. So I was like, well, this would be a good time to figure out like what my actual stance is, because I'm not just gonna like take this stance on something that I haven't done since I was 16. So I got these edible little mints, little thin mints, for pain relief. And I was like, well, let me, they're not as addictive and whatever. And so 2 years ago is when I did cannabis as an adult, and it was actually really, really nice. Like the pain relief, the sleep, you're taking 5 milligrams. So for anyone that like really does cannabis, they're like 5 milligrams, bro, you're not even gonna feel anything. And I'm like, really? And they're like, dude, I take at least 50. And then I took 5, and I was like, holy smokes, like you're really a stoner. Like 50 would put me out. So I don't smoke anything. I don't do drugs recreationally. But at this time, I had a lot of knee pain, and I had to get. I had a show. I don't know if I ever shared this story. I had a show in Boston for my buddy Mike Max. What was it called? It wasn't Destination. It was a conference he does. I feel so bad for forgetting what it was called, but it was a thing he does every year, and it was like me, Derek Minor, Thizzle, Stephen Malcolm, like all the guys, and Wande. I actually did a ton of interviews that night, and for my YouTube, and so I had a red eye, and I was like, man, I want to take this red eye so I can get there in the morning, so I can sleep on the plane and get there in the morning, but I suck at sleeping on planes, suck at sleeping anywhere. So I was like, I have these two different stems of these edible mints. They're like gummies, edible gummies. There's the indica, which is a downer, and then there's this sativa, which is an upper. And I had this sativa once before, and it just put me to sleep. This is like early, like 2 days after the knee surgery. So I had some. Relaxes your body. It's like a body high. It's not the same as like when I smoked when I was a kid. And so it just relaxed me, put me to sleep. So I had this bright idea of like, all right, like I've been a wussy. Like I've been taking 5 milligrams. I really want to sleep. So I'm going to combine the sativa and combine the indica. So I took like 15 grams of indica and 5 grams of the sativa gummies. Okay.
So 15 of the upper,
15 of the downer, 5 of the upper.
Oh wow.
I'm guessing it might have been 10 and 15 or whatever. So now I'm tripling my dose, but I really want to sleep. And I took it right as my wife dropped me off at the airport, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take it now. And it's like she knows. Like I'm not doing this in secret. Like I'm in legitimate pain here, guys. So I was really in legitimate pain. So I'm like, I could sleep. So I take some. I take all this, and then right as we're about to board the flight, it just hit me like a pile of bricks. Everything slows down, and every moment feels like Final Destination. Everything is in slow motion. I'm just chit-chatting and sparking conversations with the people waiting in line to get on the plane. I'm not that guy. And I'm just talking, yapping. And then we finally get on the plane. I have this great seat, and I'm like, I'm going to die. Like, this plane is going down. I'm going to die. This is it.
Oh, no.
I'm going to die. So I'm texting my wife. I'm texting my buddy, T-Ross, who had just went through leukemia or was going through leukemia at the time. So he was taking this stuff for pain relief as well. I think he had just gotten discharged. And I'm taking my buddy who's like a real stoner, and I'm texting them, and they're like, dude, just relax. Like, you're feeling paranoid. Everything's going to be okay. Just relax. So I'm trying to relax. I'm sitting there. Mine's going 100 miles an hour. Someone's like, dude, just read the Bible. Just read the Bible. I'm like, all right, I'm going to read the Bible. Then someone else says, you should just write some raps right now. This would be a great time to write some raps. So like nothing's working. Like the rap is awful. The Bible doesn't make any sense. Everything is just a train wreck. So then the plane finally, I'm sitting there really feeling like I need to get off this plane. Like I'm really like, I got to get off this plane. Like, and I don't struggle with anxiety, but this was intense. This was like my heart, like I could feel my heart beating, my brain, like everything is wild. So I finally just close my eyes. I'm sitting there, plane takes off. And then in the middle of the flight, I doze off. In the middle of the flight, I remember my doctor told me, hey, make sure you get up because you may get blood clots because you just had knee surgery. Like, you're safe to fly, but you need to get up at some point because you may get blood clots. I'm like, all right. So I wake up in the middle of the flight. It's a red eye, mind you. Freaking out, thinking I have blood clots, storming up and down the aisle like a madman. We land. I'm still high. It's 7 a.m. I'm still like out of it. I hit my buddy Mike Mack. He's like, take the shuttle to the train, to the Uber, and I got luggage because I got all my podcasting equipment. I got my backpack. I got merchandise, like 2 big bags of luggage and a backpack, right? It's just terrible. So I'm like, oh, I gotta take on this shuttle to go to here, to take the Uber. So then I get to the Airbnb, and the Rapzilla guys are at the Airbnb. It's 7 a.m. Everyone's asleep. They're not letting me in the Airbnb because everyone's asleep. So I'm like, I call Mike Mack. I said, dude, I can't get in the Airbnb. He's like, all right, I'm going to come pick you up. I just got a hotel room. I was like, all right, cool. I don't know if I tell him at this point. He picks me up. I just confess everything to him. I feel so convicted. I'm still high. Like, I'm just as high as I was when we took off. And Mike picks me up, takes me to the hotel. He's like, hey, man, yeah, Stephen Malcolm's there. It's a two-bedroom. You can sleep there, and then I'll pick you up around noon or whatever for the workshop you're doing. So I've never met Stephen Malcolm in person. So I'm like, sweet. Like, I'm high, and I'm going to share a room with Stephen Malcolm. So I pull up. Gosh, I don't know if I should be saying all this. So I pull up. Stephen Malcolm's there, and I just confess everything to him. Like, I'm feeling so paranoid, convicted, and I feel like everyone can see it on me, right?
Wait, everything like just the weed stuff?
The weed
not
stuff.
like your whole life?
Not the whole
Okay. Because that would have been hilarious.
And Stephen Malcolm was like, oh, like he's laughing. He's the coolest dude. Me and him are still like friends till this day because of this moment we had. So he's like, oh man, it's all good. Like just go ahead and sleep, you know? So I go to sleep. It's like 7:38 at this point. I wake up at like 12. Mike Mack's like, I'm about to come pick you up. I wake up. I'm still high. And he's like, all right, we got this conference. We gotta go here. We gotta go to the venue, and then you're on a panel at like 12:30 or 1. It's a panel with Doc Watson, Chad Horton. So they pick me up, and then like we pick up Thizzle, or Thizzle's in the car. So then like I'm even more paranoid. So then I confess to Thizzle. So I'm just like, it's just like confession central, right? So then we get to the venue. I'm still high, and I walk in, and it's just like 100 Christian rapper fans. And it felt like all of them turned, looked at me, and like wanted to say hello all at once. So I'm walking through this like sea of people to the panel. I sit down on the panel. I'm still high.
Oh my gosh.
Doc, I confess to Doc and Chad, and I'm just like, guys, like, help me, because I'm still like, this is what happened. Like, I need surgery. I was like explaining to me, I need surgery. It was just too much. So I somehow I make it through this panel. I think I posted a picture. You could see a picture of me, and I'm just like smiling, laughing the whole time. And I think everybody knows and can see it on me. So we finish this. I'm texting like, how does this stop? Like, because at this point now I'm getting paranoid. Now I'm like, this is it. Like, I did myself in. I'm gonna stay this way forever. And I'm texting my friend like, why would anyone want to feel this way? Like, this is stupid, right? So I text my friend. He's like, dude, go get a milkshake, get some sugar, and maybe it'll help flush it out. I'm like, really? Like a milkshake? He's like, just go get a milkshake. Like, I don't know if it did anything. So anyway, we do this whole thing. We get to the venue, sound check, 6:30. I'm still high.
The milkshake didn't help.
Nothing helped. And it did not wear off until right when I started my interviews. So I had interviews from Derek Minor, Wande, I forgot who else, Rockstar JT, so on. I did like 4 interviews that night. It's all a blur. And then finally, when I went on stage around like 8, 9, I don't know, then I was like in my right state of mind. And that is the worst experience I've had with anything in my life. And I will probably never do cannabis again. Or I would like, if I had like another surgery, I was injured or something like that, maybe like 5 milligrams. But I really don't get it. I don't understand. I understand the medicinal benefits. Like, I understand, like, if you're in pain, my mom broke her shoulder, and I like got her some of the same Thin Mints, but she very, very, very little she would take. But to just like casually want to feel that way, like, what? This is bizarre. So yeah, I'm good, man. No, I'm good. I'm good on cannabis. I think it's very hard to make an argument that someone can smoke cannabis and not be and still remain sober minded. I think it's very difficult to make that argument, because that's what the scriptures call us to, like, be sober minded. I don't know, but so I know you can have a glass of wine. I don't drink anymore, but I've had people may think I'm lame for this, but like, I'll have like a hard cider.
Whoa.
And be like, whoa, like, I'm feel fine. This is great, right?
I knew Mike was hard, but I didn't know Ruslan was hard too.
It was, and they're good, but I just don't see the value in drinking them.
Yeah.
But like, I understand somebody having a glass of wine or a couple glasses of wine or whatever, and not being high. And I think you can have a Thin Mint. A mint of cannabis and not be high. But I think once you start getting to 50 milligrams, I mean, I guess your tolerance goes. Anyway, so I can't wrap my brain around it. I know that's a big thing. A lot of Christians are smoking now, and it's like all cool and edgy and whatever. And I'm just like, for what? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I'm testament here on the podcast that you can have a glass of wine and still be sober minded. I'm just kidding. This is vitamin water.
Are you sober minded though?
Could you imagine just cocktails with Christians? Here we are. You think you're drinking yerba mate. You have no idea.
You spiked it.
I mean, I'm listening to this story and I'm imagining you like opening up your Bible on the plane and accidentally coming to Revelation and then really go in panic mode.
I didn't go to Revelation. I think I was like just reading like the gospel of John, and Jesus comfort me right now. He's like turning water into wine.
And I mean, yeah, and trying to figure out like how can I remedy this and like
how do I make it stop?
And milkshake was
what they told me to do. It's like milkshake. I'm like, okay, yeah. I was really like, how do I make this stop? I don't want to feel this way. I don't understand why anyone would. I wish I had the text messages, man. I lost the text message, but I had like a long sequence with my wife, with T-Ross, Tanner, and with and my and I'm not gonna name my buddy who is a stoner, but yeah.
Gotcha. Stoner friend number one.
Stoner friend number one.
Maybe
he knows
more
who he
will pop
is.
up. Yeah, to me, it's just one of those like kind of blurry lines. I feel like right now in our culture, and people saying like, "Oh yeah, like it's totally fine," or people being really against it, and just kind of like figuring out, what is the right thing. And for me, like one of your YouTube videos that I heard, one of the things you mentioned was if you're spending a lot of your paycheck on it, then that's probably not a good thing, and I guess that could go for anything. Like if you're spending a bunch of money on alcohol, weed, and I'm just naming bad things, but even if you're spending a bunch of money on just entertainment, like probably not healthy for your finances. And like as a Christian, you're probably not being diligent with what God has given you. And I know that, on this show, there's been a couple times where we've riffed on Dave Ramsey, and I just want Dave Ramsey to know we don't hate you. Actually, Dave Ramsey got me out of debt. I am completely debt free. And I know that Dave Ramsey did the same for you. So starting from like your lowest of lows, can you take us through your financial journey and how Dave Ramsey kind of helped you?
We grew up, me and my mother grew up on welfare, full on lining up for food to get whatever we could, which is ironic because I was born in the Soviet Union and we would line up for rations there. So here we go from the Soviet Union lining up for rations to then like coming to America. My dad leaves and we're on welfare. I don't think we had food stamps. At least I don't remember us having food stamps. It was just welfare. And then we'd go and line up for different places for food. So I grew up like poverty, right? And I don't remember ever going without food, but I remember having to line up to get free food. Like it wasn't just always there. And by the time I got married, we were kind of like my mom and me were kind of like middle class, I guess you could say. So we get married, we move out, and we go on another vacation on our 1-year anniversary. Just like totally. I was the one pushing this. My wife is very frugal, but I was like, yeah, on another cruise, like 2 cruises in a row, which is like in hindsight, like what? Like I would never go on a cruise now, right? Like
not in 2021,
right? It's a stupid vacation in hindsight. So I remember going on a cruise a year into being married, putting it on our credit cards, broke. And not really being able to enjoy the cruise because I know when we come back, I got all this debt. I'm dealing with all these different situations. And what led after that is we discovered, we actually went through Crown Financial first, which is the guy who mentored Dave Ramsey created a program called Crown Financial. I don't remember his name right now. But then we discovered Dave Ramsey. And so this is after this cruise. And prior to that, I had co-signed on a condo with my mom, and she let it go into foreclosure. So I moved out. She lets it go into foreclosure. The HOAs go to collection. That like she just stopped paying it, right? And this is in the middle of like the housing crisis. Like this is like 06, 07, 08, right? Like right as the market crashed. So she just stopped paying it. So I co-signed on this thing.
So I'm like moved out at this point. We're not taking vacations on our credit cards, like working the Dave Ramsey baby steps. We had our baby emergency fund. We're a couple months in the process, and I kept getting these notices, totally my fault, for the HOA. It was like $1,200 in HOA because like $100 she stopped paying it, so it added $1,200. That compounded to like $5,000 with fees, and they kept sending me notices like, hey, there's a judgment again. There's like, go to court. Then there's a judgment again, right? And I didn't go because it had my last name misspelled on the paperwork. So I'm sitting here thinking like, this isn't me. Like, you guys don't got me. Like, whatever. I didn't realize that they had my social security number.
Yeah, that matches.
Right? So the name's misspelled, but whatever. So I just ignored it. Like, I was like, well, this isn't my debt. Like, this is my mom. Like, I've been moved out, right? Like, I'm trying to justify it in my head. So this $1,200 debt rolls into a $5,000 debt. And I wake up one day. Thankfully, we had just paid our rent. I wake up one day. We're a couple months in the process. We got some good momentum going. And my wife calls me, and she's like, hey, our accounts are levied. And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, all the money from our accounts is taken out. I can't use the debit card, and we have no money. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. So then I'm like, that's crazy. Thankfully, we just paid the rent. So then start figuring out what was going on, and I figured out that this old debt called the bank, got all the money from our account,
Wiped
it, and this is like the second or the third of the month. So I'm like, holy smokes, right? And again, thankfully, we had just paid our rent. We have no money. And I start the process of like, how do I deal with this? Call the collections people. This is what you owe. I think we still owed like another $3,000 on it. We didn't have a ton of money in our account. We had $1,000 emergency fund, and like whatever our budget was, maybe like another $1,000 or $1,500. So I start the process. I go down this whole thing. In the process, I check my own credit, and I find out when my mom let that place go into foreclosure, the first mortgage was foreclosed on, like the big one. But there was another $60,000 second mortgage that was on my credit, and I just owed it. So now I'm like, holy moly, like I owe this $3,000. I owe all my other student loans, my car notes. My accounts are levied, and I owe another $60,000 on the second mortgage that didn't go into a foreclosure. It's just on my credit. This is like 3 or 4 years after my mom's out of the place now, or 2 years. I don't remember the timeline. And I was like, man, this is bad. Like, this is really bad. So I literally was looking at bankruptcy. I was like, man, I might have to file. Like, there's no way. Like, this is like over $100,000 of debt, right? And I start doing research and finding stuff out. And I was listening to Dave Ramsey at the time. We didn't even go through his program. Like, we literally just read what the baby steps were and just listened. That's how broke we are. We couldn't even go to the program.
Can't afford Financial Peace.
Can't even
University.
financial
Like bootlegging it.
We're listening to the podcast every day. We're working the baby steps. And listening to his show, he talked about how to settle with creditors. And so I remember listening to it. And because this was an older debt, it's like a 4 or 5 year old debt, they would call. And no, I called them. I found them, called them. And I said, look, this is old. This is going to fall off my credit in 2 or 3 years anyway. I have $1,000 for you, and I'll settle this $60,000 worth of debt for $1,000.
$60,000
Yeah.
for $1,000.
For $1,000.
And just laugh, or they hang up?
They were like, let us get back to you. So call me back a couple of days later, and they're like, hey, we'll accept it.
No.
Yeah. This is a guy overseas. So at this point, the debt, the $60,000 had been sold multiple times. So they're getting it for pennies on the dollar. They're like, whatever, like we'll take it, you know? So I was like, write at the paperwork. I followed all the steps, write the paperwork, sent them a cashier's check, and I settled that $60,000 of debt for $1,000. The ironic part is that $1,200 of HOAs that my mom didn't pay, I had to pay the full $5,000 on that. They knew they had me. And so settled that, paid off that. 18 months later, we were, plus the other 40 or 45 grand of debt we had. 18 months later, we're completely debt free, and everything turned around. We were able to save up a 6-month emergency fund. I got a better job, In the process of doing this, in the process of that moment, I did something I'd never which is a feature sale. So rappers charge for features. I had never done this before, and I wasn't that big. I maybe had like a couple thousand followers, 5,000 followers at the most.
You're just so I can clarify. You're saying like you feature in someone's song?
Yes.
Okay.
So I say, hey, I'm doing this feature sale, and if you guys want me on your song, this would be the time to get me on your song. Reach out to me. I don't remember the system that I had. This is 2010, 2000, maybe 2011. I don't remember what it was. Somewhere in that ballpark, 2011, I think. 2010. I don't remember, but did this feature sale. I made $3,000 in a week. I had never made that kind of money before. So hitting rock bottom pushed me to do something I'd never done anymore, because we really just needed money for food. Like, we had no food money. And I did that feature sale, and that unlocked something in me to say, oh, like, what I have is valuable. I have a skill set. I have influence. I can monetize this. And it completely changed the trajectory of how I saw money, how I saw my own value as a creative, what was possible. And so by the time we were out of debt, we got out of debt. My wife got pregnant. I was traveling, doing shows. We went to Paris. We went to Rome. We went to New York. We did a bunch of traveling while she was pregnant. We were in Paris. I remember one night we were in Paris, and we walked like 2 miles because we got lost. And she was my 5 month pregnant. She's about 5 months pregnant, and we're walking across Paris. It's like dark, late. And it was really good for us to like do a linear process of building our life, because most people just kind of jump in, just like, we're married now. This is have fun. We had and we both come from poverty. Like, we both come from like, there is no help. Like, so that was this moment. And then fast forward, we come back from Paris. My wife has the baby. I'm on staff at my church at this point, and I'm also doing music. So this is right as the Dream Junkies were starting to rev up. And I just kind of filled the tension at my church. I was there for 2 years at that point. And I remember being on tour. Levi is this is like March or April. Yeah, this is South by Southwest. We were coming home from South by Southwest March. Levi was born in November. So Levi's 5 months at this point, 6 months at this point. My wife is a stay-at-home mom. I'm working at a church. I'm making decent money. We're out of debt. But we have 6 months of living expenses saved. We've traveled. We've done all the things that we want to do. And I was like, I called her, and I remember all the guys went and got ponchos, and they were hanging out. And I was like, man, I don't feel like I could work this job anymore. So I called her and I said, hey, I think when I get home, we should pray about leaving the church, leaving my position at the church, not leaving the church, leaving my position at the church, putting in a 2-week notice, something like that. And I remember my wife told me, I don't think there's anything we need to pray about. I think you need to come home and put in your 2-week notice. And I was like, what? Like, you are way more courageous than I am, to just be like, no, like, we need to make this jump as an entrepreneur. And she had seen, like, I had proven to her that I could make money. I had proven to her that I could provide. And so my wife had way more courage than me at that point, dude. And so, yeah, we come home, we put in a 2-week notice. This is March. It turned into a 2-month notice. They kept me through the end of May, which, again, this is my church family, so I'm not sweating it. And then June 1st, 2015, I go full-time as a creative. And you could actually, guys, look up my day as a full-time rapper, and you could actually see my very first day as a full-time rapper. I did a vlog series back then on that. And, yeah, man, so I've been full-time with creative stuff ever since.
That's amazing. Like, that's absolutely incredible. And
shout out to Dave Ramsey. Stop pooping on Dave Ramsey.
Yeah, we love you, Dave. I feel like, just like hearing that, first of all, you were talking about all the places that you travel, and I was thinking the only time I've ever done that is at Epcot here in Orlando, going from like Rome to like Paris and all these places. Anyways, you talk about like, because I think that a lot of people, when they're like listing off their spiritual maturities or like their disciplines, I don't think that they would necessarily like list like manning up and taking care of your family and like figuring out how am I going to provide. And I think that just like hearing you talk about like that, you had that hopeless mindset, that poverty mindset, that woe is me mindset, or just like whatever happens to that low socioeconomic class, they just kind of feel like they're stuck and they're in that rut.
Yeah.
And, it's like they focus on prayer, they'll go to church, they might be getting discipled by somebody, they might be discipling others. Like they have all these other spiritual things in their life, but they're not mature in like manning up and owning, their family's finances. So how do you view that as far as being part of spiritual maturity?
That's a great question. And I was just texting with Dr. Eric Mason, who's I've had him on my channel, and I think he's brilliant. He wrote the book Urban Apologetics. He really pastors a church out in Philadelphia, and we were having this conversation. And one of the things he said to me is, he said, sometimes our theology is experienced, meaning we experience things and we kind of form questions around our theology. He said, if you think about it, a lot of the New Testament is Paul or Peter answering questions that people had. And he said poor people and rich people have different questions. And I was like, man, that is so spot on, that I had totally different questions as someone that's coming from poverty, single parent household, my wife coming from poverty in a foster care system. We have, not in a system, she was adopted by her best friend's mom when she was like 16, 17 legally, and then that's how we met. So we're coming from experiences where our questions are just different. How do I just always live paycheck to paycheck? Is this the best that I can do with my life? Is this all my potential that God, right? So much of that is subconscious and subtle. And so much of that requires people being exposed to different ideas and different ways of thinking. And if you're coming from a middle class background, if you're coming from an upper class background, sometimes you don't know what it's like not to have food. So you're not asking the questions of like, how do I give glory to God in my finances? Because you've always kind of had this median. But if you look at 85% of America's millionaires are first generation rich, meaning they come from nothing, they become millionaires. 85%, 65% of America's billionaires with a B are first generation rich. They come from nothing, they become billionaires. Wow. So there's something about not having and then expanding versus, like I've always ate nutritious food and always had a car and always had a AC, right? When you don't have that, and so I think you then don't understand that you don't have the capacity to know everything your parents had to do to get you there, or everything their parents had to do to get them there. And wealth begets wealth. That's one of, I think, the pros and the cons of a free market society is wealth begets wealth. So if you understand how wealth works, it's very easy to just let it compound on top of each other. If you don't understand how wealth works, you're always just working to eat and you're never building on anything. And so I think it's a deeper question because, one, it's a question of responsibility. I believe people in North America, in the West, have a obligation to some degree to care for the poor, to care for the widow, to care for the orphan. We are in the most prosperous time I think the world has ever seen. As much as it's hard and there's wealth inequality and all these kind of things, but we are in a time where someone like me can literally go from nothing to something within a very small window. So I think there's a personal responsibility to, am I doing the most with my time, talent, and treasure per Matthew 25? I think there's a moral obligation that if I have the ability to build wealth, not just for the benefit of myself and my family, but for the benefit of others, I should. And that's the lens I'm looking at it from. And I think most people probably just haven't experienced poverty, don't know what it's like to go to poverty, and also don't know how to take their experiences and help other people. And that's what probably brings me the most amount of joy is I think that entrepreneurship, kingdom entrepreneurship, ethical wealth building solves a lot of people's problems. I think it solves a lot of problems from wealth inequality to so many different things that we're dealing with. Marriages, strained marriages, the majority of divorces are because of money fights and money trouble, right? And so if people can get a hold of their finances, and then it just impacts everything else around your life. It impacts your fitness, right? They did studies, and most people who go through the Dave Ramsey plan who get debt free also lose weight. That's an interesting correlation, you know?
And I've never heard that.
Because you start working that discipline muscle. You start telling yourself, no, you can't just buy this because you feel like it. No, you can't just eat this because you want it, right? And so I think Dave Ramsey in my life has been very helpful on a very practical level and given me an imagination to dream. I've met him once briefly, cool guy. And I think that is why some of the stuff that's came out is so disheartening. Is like, man, you really have a voice that I think people, like you have a message that people need. Don't get bogged down in the nonsense that then creates a barrier for people to listen to you because of whatever, like, you're just going to be flippant. You're going to say, like, don't, that's the part that's a bummer that I think a lot of folks who have really good ideas kind of just are a little too flippant with their language. And then it becomes a barrier. And some people who actually need the information, it becomes a stumbling block. Like people who are in poverty who probably lean a little democratic because that's all you know, that's what you've been conditioned to believe, actually need the Dave Ramseys. And so I don't know how he's going to evolve and pivot. Because who he is now is a little more unfiltered and a little more aggressive than when I was into him 12 years ago, right? Mm. He was a little softer, he was gentler, and it seems like he's kind of progressively gotten angrier. It's probably because he's getting attacked a lot too.
Probably, you got to put up a little bit of a wall, a little bit of a guard. But it's interesting to hear you say all of that, and I also know, like for you, it wasn't like, oh, I'm just sitting around not doing anything, being comfort and like complacent with my life. It was almost like you were pursuing rap, you were going hard at it, but maybe even though you were great at being a rapper and maybe that was something that you were passionate about, it wasn't the best seat for you. Mm-hmm. And now that I see you finding, like, I mean, you are like going full force with YouTube right now. And it's like, yes, you could have continued to be a rapper, but I feel like when you found this new seat in the YouTube realm, like not only are you loving what you do, but you are also now, I think, happier maybe with it or more successful with it. I don't know. And I could be completely wrong on that. But my question to you is like, do you think that sometimes people are just like the right people, but in the wrong seat?
Yeah, I think the right people in the wrong seat, I think not having the luxury to try enough things to figure out what the right seat is. That's a luxury. Like, I think we forget, like, to be able to be in a position where I'm at where, yes, I'm coming from a perspective where it's like sports or entertainment. Those are the options, right? Or the perceived options, right? Like I could have went to Job Corps and become a plumber or something like that as well. But the options that you think you have are sports and entertainment. The plan A was become a professional basketball player. That was really plan A.
What happened?
I discovered that there has never been an Armenian in the NBA ever. And I'm half Armenian. So half of my DNA is like, boom, that's it. It's a wrap.
Mm.
And shout out to my buddy Rufat. He says this. If you factor in the Kardashians, Armenians have taken more basketball careers away from the NBA than they've added. Shout out to Rufat. So,
oh my gosh.
When I discovered that, I was like, oh well, this is not in the cards. I'm 5'9", 5'10", sophomore year. I don't have the capacity. I am an only child in terms of me and my mom. I have a half brother and sister on my dad's side, and we're real close now. But as a kid, I wasn't a team player. I didn't quite understand authority because my father figure was gone, so I couldn't really function on like a traditional basketball team. So there's a lot of things. So I was like, okay, well, this isn't working. I got cut my sophomore year, and people are like, Michael Jordan got cut his sophomore year. Michael Jordan got cut his sophomore year from his varsity baskall team. He still played junior varsity basketball. I got cut from my junior varsity team. Okay, so I was already dabbling in music, and I was like, let's just do that. And what really did it was my mom. At that point, we're kind of like middle class now, or lower middle class. And my mom got me a computer. This is 2001. Yeah, 2001. And I was like one of the first guys with a computer with a little recording studio. And the quality was awful, but I was able to start very early with home recording. That was a luxury.
Yeah.
I was the only kid that had a recording studio. Me and like one other family that I knew had a recording studio. Not like that's not even a studio. Like compared to this, it was like it's like a PC with a terrible interface and like a condenser microphone, no pop filter, like. And I would go and buy. I would go to the post office store, like the postal annex store, and I would buy boxes. And I would put boxes like cardboard, and I would break apart the boxes, and I would put them up as like a booth. Like I built my own booth with cardboard boxes, and I didn't understand like panels. It just all sounded terrible, but that was a luxury that most people don't have. So like that, and then from that, I learned how to produce music. I learned how to mix a little bit, and then from that, I was able to learn video editing, and from video editing I was able to get a job at my church doing the video and the media team while I was doing music. With music, I started getting exposed to people that were doing music at a full-time level, making six figures or high, 80,000, 70,000 a year. So between meeting guys like Sho Baraka and Lecrae earlier in the process, I'm like, whoa, this is possible in Christian music. And then I also had friends that were just not like in the secular side of things, doing college shows, that were doing well, just booking secular college shows. So I'm like, I could actually do this. In 2008, 2009, this is before Chance the Rapper. This is before Russ. This is before it was cool to be an independent artist. There was no pathway. It was like, how the heck do you build an audience? This is before Instagram, right? But I had access to people that were making great money playing colleges, non-Christian colleges, and Christians who were making money playing churches. I knew so I had access and exposure to people. That's a luxury. That's a privilege. That's not some people don't have. Now with the internet, the world's a little smaller. So there was always these moments that I think in God's sovereignty that he positioned me to have these encounters with people that let me dream. And once I was able to dream, then it just, okay, how do I reverse engineer and develop the type of character and integrity and a skill set to become an artist first, then learn how to become an entrepreneur. And then it was like, okay, now if I'm an entrepreneur, I have to objectively sit back and say, it's not about what you want to do. It's about what's missing in the marketplace and what problem you're trying to solve. And the truth is, we don't need another Christian rapper. Like we don't. We have a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them who are incredible. And what is the and I knew that based on my skill set, based on my experience, my life story, there was a bigger need and a bigger gap I could fill with what I'm doing now. And I still do music. Like I've put out music. I'm in the process of putting out music now, and it's fun, but it's not the bread and butter, and there's less pressure. I can hire people out, so I don't have to produce it and mix it and do everything myself. And it's actually more fulfilling to do it now. And the music revenue stream long term, because of publishing, is actually really lucrative if you understand how that works. Most people don't understand how it works. I happen to understand how it works, which is how I was able to quit my job in 2015 and go full-time with music. So, yes, I'm happier doing YouTube. It's less work. It's more fulfilling. I don't have to travel as much. I get to spend way more time with my family. And I think it actually solves some very tangible problems for people, which is what I really wanted to do initially. I really wanted to solve problems. And I was like, well, I'll do the music for that. But music doesn't translate the same for a conversation like this. Like I couldn't have, like writing a song about financial literacy, like what is it like? Oh, I'm debt free. Yeah. Like it's cringe, like to try to rap about that kind of stuff.
It's like Schoolhouse Rock kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned like indie music like blowing up and now being like the cool thing. It was awesome. Ashley and I actually got to go to Holy Smoke Fest and see like a ton of indie artists and rappers. We got to hang out with Dill and Mowgli and John. I mean, like a lot of guys that you have done songs with.
Yeah. Those are my friends. Those are like my real friends.
Yeah, I know. I was honestly thinking that I might have seen you there. Like I was like, Ruslan actually might.
If I wasn't doing this, I may have went to that.
Okay. Because you chose us over Holy Smoke.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
chose
you
guys.
No big deal, man. No big deal. You know?
And bringing my family, which was fun about this. Holy Smoke, it wouldn't have been fun to bring my family. We wouldn't have done anything. But yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. We hope that you love Disney. I mean, I worked for Disney for 5 years and left a job that I loved to come do this. Kind of similar to what you were saying with like, I could have stayed at Disney, like, and I could have made great money. but I feel like with what God has given me and with like what I can do through this podcast, for me, I don't know if this is exactly what you're going with your message of love what you do, but it's like I'm finding something that I love and something that I feel like is bigger and something that I can be used in a bigger way. Because, yeah, there's a ton of cast members at Disney that can be out there doing what I was doing, making magic. And like you said, there's a ton of rappers out there doing that. But, like, I feel like I have a special gifting here. You have a special gifting, obviously, on YouTube. If you're not watching Ruslan's stuff on YouTube, go check it out. It's phenomenal, amazing stuff. But my question, kind of going with the love what you do, is that similar to, like, because I know with the COVID thing, the world shut down, everybody's sitting at their house, not working. And I remember thinking, having that thought, oh, it's summer break, baby. Let's go. Like, this is going to be so much fun. We're going to binge, Disney Plus that had just come out. We're like working puzzles. We're like having so much fun. And then all of a sudden you're just like sitting there and you're like, I'm kind of depressed.
1 week later, you're like, what am I doing?
And I, and I have conversations with people that are still sitting at home, not doing anything. Yeah. And the reasoning is, well, if I can't find a job that pays more than unemployment, why would I go find a job? And I'm thinking, maybe for your, like, everything inside of you.
Yeah.
Like, is that kind of what you're going with the love what you do? And, okay.
Yeah. So
talk about that a little bit.
The mantra that's pushed to us, I think, in our culture, specifically Gen Z, millennials, there's this do what you love, right? Do what you love. And if you guys watch the WeWorks documentary, that was a lot of it. Like, do what you love, do what you love. And then you found out that was a cult. You're like, holy smokes, this is a full-on cult. This is crazy. And the guy, like, the company got evaluated to be a $60 billion company, but they weren't a tech company. They were just a co-spacing company. They didn't own any of the real estate. They become the $60 billion company. The CEO gets away with $1 billion, like $800 million, and like they almost collapse. And now they're not worth a fraction of the $60 billion they were at one time evaluated to do. And it was all built on this farce of do what you love. And I think in my case, I had to first learn to love what I do before I ever got a chance to do what I love. I first had to learn to be faithful in the little things, which the New Testament and Jesus talks about, right? Being faithful in what was in front of me. So before I ever had a chance to even work a cool job, like being the media guy at my church, I was working with adults with developmental disabilities. And it was super fulfilling and super fun.
Wow, yeah.
Because I learned to love what I do and honor God in all things. And I think that shift in my mentality in that this isn't like, it's just a Joe job. I just got to show up and, right? No, like it brought dignity. It brought character and integrity to me. It really changed who I was from the inside out. And every time, the more faithful I was in the little things, the more God would advance me to do the things that I actually love to do, which is YouTube and communicating and music. So I think there's this entitlement we have because of technology and all these different things. And some people, listen, man, if you're 17, 18, you're just starting out, you could probably finesse it and just jump right into what you want to do if you are smart and you understand technology. But the vast majority of us are probably going to have to go on some kind of journey to discover what is it that we want and what are we good at and try a bunch of different things. So that has to maintain that perspective of like, I have to learn what I love. I have to learn to love what I do. And if I can learn to love what I do, eventually I will develop the skill set to do what I love. And I think that's missing. I think there's a gap there. And that's the heart behind it is we have to have that perspective, because if we don't, then it's, why would I go get a job if I could just collect unemployment? And it's like, for your mental health, for your sanity, for your dignity, like you're just sitting there, binging shows and getting fat. Like, this is not going to end well. Like, this is not going to end well for you. And I think there's so much dignity in just work, getting up. I mean, even just whatever. Think of the most remedial work. And there's dignity in that, man. There's dignity in serving a person. There's dignity in cleaning, Sometimes I go in my lawn. I am not the fancy. I don't even know what they call it. I'm not the handyman. Sometimes I go into my backyard and I just do yard work. And it's so cleansing. Like, it feels good to just work with your hands and just do something. And it doesn't make sense on paper. Like, I should definitely just hire a gardener. But because I find fulfillment in it, I could throw on a podcast. Work is good. God created work to be good. And then because of the fall, then it became thorns and thistles. Then it became hard. Then it became, and I think once you have this encounter with Jesus and your heart gets regenerated, I think then you can have that redemption of work. And even if you don't get to go and do cool stuff, you could still have that dignity and that value in work. And that's ultimately what I'm after, is like, how do I communicate that to people so that we can have more people thriving and flourishing. And it's tough because a lot of this can sound very like prosperity gospel-ish, right? Like, oh man, just God's gonna bless you with a cool job. It's like, well, 6 billion people in the world will never have a car.
Wow.
Like, that's a lot of people, right? And we're like, yeah, we have. So again, what is our context? What do we have here? How can we work here in this context in a way that honors God with what's been given us, so that maybe we could help some of those 6 billion people, right? Sponsor kids and all these different things. And I think that's the part that gets a little messy, because you can't always take this and make it applicable to everywhere, because it's not applicable to everywhere. There are people that will never, like, their survival would just be on, we have to walk to get water and we have to walk to do this. But there's still dignity in that work. There's still dignity in how they have to survive. And that's what that's like, my heart is like, man, again, if there's more Christians thriving and flourishing here, we can build more wells in parts of the world that needs wells, so they don't have to spend a day going and getting water. And I guess it's like $15,000 to build a well in a village in South America and Asia and Africa. $15,000, that's not a lot of money, right? So I think that's, wealth can be really used to help people that otherwise wouldn't have access, right? And it's like, if we have plenty, why not generously give to people who don't have the same privileges and luxuries that we do?
Yeah, I mean, being able to have riches and have wealth and have financial freedom allows you to be able to help so many other people. Right. I mean, that's kind of what we talk about here. That's, kind of behind our mission. It's not necessarily having a lot of money, but just kind of going out on that limb and deciding, hey, and you could blame it on the Bible, say the Bible made me do it, but saying, you know what, I want to do something bigger with my life than just sit at home and watch Netflix and draw unemployment or wait for God to magically give me a job. Yeah. And if that is you and you're just sitting at home waiting, why don't you pull out your cell phone right now and text freedom to 833-370-1610. And I know that we've been talking about this for episode after episode, and now it's finally launched and it's went live. And so now you can actually like go on and we've got people doing it. But anyways, I've been going through the 7-day prayer challenge, and you mentioned earlier that your wife went through the foster care system. Is that what you said?
So not through the system. So she was so my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, they've had some rough times in the 80s. A lot of the war on drugs thing kind of took them out, and they did some jail time, prison time, that kind of stuff. And so my mother-in-law would move back and forth, and she'd go between Dallas, Seattle, San Diego, and she'd kind of rotate. And so my wife, who was in high school at the time, she did like a year of high school in Seattle, came back down, went to San Diego, back to Seattle, right? This whole thing. So she was hanging out with her best friend, and they were like, hey, you can come stay with us. And so she ends up moving in with her best friend, and they, I think, legally went through the process of like becoming her foster parents.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't that she was in the system, it was that she went and lived with her mom, her best friend's mom, and her best friend and their family. And that was like a really cool, she got plugged into a church. She was going, we were at the same high school. She was able to stay at the same high school. We met in high school and became acquaintances. And yeah, and then some of her nieces and nephews have definitely been through the system and been it's rough stuff, closed adoptions, open adoptions, and we're able to kind of help some of them, be really, really present in their lives, and that's nice.
So the foster care system is kind of personal,
Yeah.
or like near and dear to your guys' hearts.
Yeah. My niece lives with us, so she's awesome. She was in a foster care system. I see my nephew all the time. I'm pretty sure he's legally adopted. They both know their biological moms, which is my sister-in-law, my wife's sister.
Okay.
And so they're super rad, man. So like I love hanging out. And they're, my niece is like, she's about to be 21 in September. My nephew is 16. He's going into his sophomore year of high school. So yeah, and so yeah, I love hanging out with them, and I would love my nephew to move in with me, but he lives in the valley with his foster mom, and I'm like, dude, but right now my mother-in-law is living with us, so we're like, anytime now. And go.
Usually it's the other way around. It's like the mom waiting for the kids to move out. Like, okay, you're like 30 now, still living in the basement, playing video games. Let's get to getting. You've moved in your wife now. You've had a child in our house. Like, okay. All right. So something else that I feel like is happening right now in our world is cancel culture. People getting canceled. And one of my first videos that I actually saw of you, it was one that James had sent me, was your Exposed series. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, like, okay, because first of all, if you have an Exposed video series, who's going to cancel you? Like, you've already, essentially done what cancel culture does to yourself.
Right.
You're like, hey, I was first to it. But I'm curious, like, do you think do you think that is the next movement for celebrity videos? Kind of like I Am Second. Do you think we're going to see a bunch of celebrities now doing these videos where they expose themselves? And also, what was your thought process behind doing those videos?
I hope so. I hope we see more of that, because I think then you get a better paradigm for where celebrities coming from, and understanding what they're about, and understanding their perspective. I think some of what I did is preemptively so that you can't dig up anything on me. Like, there's nothing to dig up. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm still trying to discover things. Here's my story. So that is preemptive. Like, that is preemptive, transparent, taking ownership of the narrative. Because I think when you don't do that, then you open yourself up to potentially, if you say something that people weren't expecting, right? And it's like, well, no, this is what I've always been on. Like, what are you talking about, right? So I think you have to. I think, in my opinion, you should do it preemptively, because if you don't do it preemptively, then somebody's going to try to dig that up. I think when I think of cancel culture, I think right now of what the Baby is going through. I don't know if you know who the Baby is. He's a rapper. The Baby is a fascinating rapper. He makes cool music. But it's very misogynistic, and it's very violent at times, right? And the Baby has this long track record of being combative and violent on camera with fans, with his security with fans, right? And what really kind of got him to take off, and this is a little dark, those of you guys that know the backstory. So he was already making music. He showed up to South by Southwest in 2017 with a diaper on, like the Baby diaper. I think he even went by Baby Jesus at one time.
Oh, wow.
So he shows up. So he's been chipping away at music, been doing it for a long time. But where he went viral is there were 2 shooting cases back to back where he fought off people in self-defense. And one of the folks was him with his family shopping at Walmart, and somebody pulled up on him and tried him. And because North Carolina is like, I think, a open carry state or whatever, and he ends up getting into an altercation and killing this dude.
Wow.
And then goes viral, right? And then it goes viral. Like, that story goes viral, and then all of a sudden his music started kind of bubbling up again, and he took off, and he had to deal with Interscope. And prior to this, he was already in the music industry. And like, what kind of set him off, I mean, the music was always like catchy and fun, but was this like these violent incidences. And so and then there was another home invasion where someone broke into his house, he shot somebody and killed him. I don't know if he killed him that time. So this dude is like a documented he's killed people, right, in self-defense, and I'm all for your Second Amendment rights. But he didn't just do that. Like, he dropped a mixtape like a week after, conveniently timed. He kind of talks about it a lot. Talks about that he's like has bodies. You know, he's killed people before. Like, he's talked about that before. And again, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. But this dude is a documented killer with a very violent music at times, right? And he does these and says these things in kind of like funny ways, you know. And what happened in the last week and a half is he performed at Rolling Loud, and he made some comments that weren't, I mean, they were very crass comments about, they were trying to get the crowd hype, and he was like, yo, if you ain't got HIV, AIDS, put your phones up. If you're a woman and your coochie smells like water, put your phones up. If you ain't in a parking lot doing oral on another gentleman, put your phones up. So he says these things, right? And they're trying to get the crowd. Now this is gonna translate super weird when you don't hear the crowd and you're not there for the. But they're just trying to do call and response for crowd participation stuff, not to justify anything you just said. And what happened was that set off like a wild course of events, and they were saying that these are homophobic statements, the tie into AIDS, the tie into giving gentlemen oral in a parking lot, right? And the baby's like, what? Like, I have gay fans. This isn't, what are you guys talking about, you know? And he kept trying to brush it off. And then he had like 4 or 5 festivals canceled back to back. Lollapalooza was canceled. Austin Festival. Like, he just got dropped off of all of these festivals back to back. Shows started getting So here's a guy who is a documented killer, okay? There's multiple videos of him beating people up or getting into scuffles with people, or his bodyguards beating up fans that he felt were disrespectful to him. His music is wildly misogynistic. It's fairly violent. And the thing that gets him canceled is not rapping about murder. It's about saying something kind of insensitive around something else kind of insensitive regarding to the LGBTQ community. Right. That's where we are in this space. And so he issued multiple apologies. And then finally, like the last, and he like, it was more like clearing up, like, guys, no, like, I don't have a problem with gay people. Like, there was a gay person in the front row of the show. Like, what are you talking about? And it just got worse and worse and worse. And then he finally issued like, you know, people don't let you grow before you. I'm still trying to educate myself on this topic and how insensitive he issued like a full on like apology. And it just goes to show that these are the things that can get you canceled in the moment. And he did his best to own his narrative as well as he could. But there's still this weird imbalance where like rapping about murder and rapping about women giving you oral whenever you want them and how much of a, you know, player you are is okay. Misogyny is okay. Violence is okay. Murder is okay. But this is absolutely not okay. And if you dare say anything about it, you're canceled. I mean, and it was like guys like Questlove from The Roots and everybody coming out. And I'm not justifying what he said, but I'm saying that's the space we're in, where you can say something and not even on paper sound crazy, but because of the context and the climate, now you have 4 or 5 festivals back to back getting canceled, right? And like, it's now impacting your entire momentum. So I don't know how to navigate that for someone like the baby. Like, how does he work through that? Like, you know, and the hypocrisy in all of this, like the double standards in all of this. That's the thing that is frustrating about cancel culture, is it's just really like this is what gets him canceled. Like, all the other stuff's okay though, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane because growing up as a 90s kid and seeing, like, I mean, for me, my hip-hop, my first, like, artist that I listened to was Eminem, and I fell in love, and hearing all the stuff he had, and I think that just, I mean, you talk about violence, you talk about, you know, slandering people, you talk about somebody who probably would have got canceled if he would have been a new rapper today. You know, I just think that it comes from the power of social media, the power of the internet, the power of everyone having a voice now. And it's like, I love that you kind of took the, you know, you kind of got the jump on that world and said, you know what, I'm going to expose myself. I'm going to put it all out there. can't come after me. And now you're kind of taking the internet and the social media world and using it to your advantage. Like watching your videos, you do like the split screen, and on one half you'll have like a Zoom video going, which I'm guessing you know these people, or these are strangers, or like
folks in our Patreon community.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we put a pay barrier, so you have to at least sign up for Patreon to call in. And so that way, like, the Zoom call's not just publicly open, and we can get, like, trolled and spammed.
You're not getting like chat roulette dudes.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So these are fans of yours paying, and then it's just like a random lottery. If they is it like 5 people?
No. We just open up the Zoom call, and then so like they can call in and ask or comment or whatever. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you are not only building community, but you're also creating content at the same time.
Yep.
That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Was that part of the plan?
Well, I'm again big Dave Ramsey guy.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Ask Gary V show. I think when you can have the content create itself, when you can have the people create the content for you, I think that's the ultimate content creation strategy, right? It's like people call in, you answer their questions, or at the very least, you at least know what they're interested in. You at least know what they want to talk about. It's very empowering as a creative.
Yeah, I mean, that's super. I mean, I feel like it's convenient for you, and then also amazing for like the super fans to be able to feel like they're a part of it, and then to see their videos go live. Like, oh my gosh, like my question is the newest video on Ruslan's page, and now you're like using this Premiere feature. I saw like videos are dropping, and people can like wait in the little lobby until they drop. Yeah, super cool. One of your videos, you talk about this word churchianity. Okay, you remember what I'm talking about? Churchianity.
I mean, I use churchianity a lot.
Yeah, and not too many people use churchianity. They'll say like Christianese, and but churchianity. Can you give us some examples of what churchianity is and explain the dangers of it?
Churchianity is when you combine church culture and the little intricacies of church culture, and you start making those Christianity. Meaning Christianity is a 2,000-year-old religion with multiple types of people who all color within the lines of what we will call Orthodox Christian doctrine. There's some things that most Christians hold to that these are the essentials of our faith. And this is broad. I'm using very broad approaches. So if you align yourself with Scripture, and you align yourself with like the early creeds, the Apostles' Creeds, the Nicene Creeds, God, Jesus is God, salvation by grace through faith, right? Mary was the virgin birth of Christ. So you color within those lines, I think you're a Christian, right? Anything that doesn't color outside those lines, when you start saying Jesus is not God, okay, now that's something else. That's not Christian. So I use the word Christianity very broadly. So I think Ethiopian orthodoxy is Christianity. They have some other books in their Bible, like the Apocrypha. I think a lot of Catholics are Christians, right? So there's that whole Christian versus Catholic divide. Like I think if you color within it, now I don't agree with everything that they, maybe the emphasis they put on Mary is a bit much, or I think Catholics believe Mary remained a virgin even after Jesus' birth, which I'm not sure about that, so forgive me. Don't cancel me, Catholics. But I think so. There's some things there that I disagree. But I think like if you hold to the gospel, you hold to the creed, you hold to the essentials of the faith. What's happening in America is that we then take other things and like add stuff to that, and then you create this like weird hybrid culture that isn't reflective of your original culture and your where you come from, and you create a new culture. So it's not, God doesn't save you to help you go back in and redeem your culture. No, God saves you and puts you in another bubble, and now you're isolated from culture, and now you're removed, and now there's these very different rules for how you have to conduct yourself, and how you have to vote, and how you have to think, and how you have to engage with people, and who you're allowed to be friends with. And it's very bizarre. And then you said Christianese. It has its own language. It has its own music. It has its own even style of dress. And now instead of God is redeeming culture through Christians, and the parts of culture that are non-biblical we reject, and the parts of culture that are fine we accept, we now go in and we are in a whole nother culture. We've created a separate culture. And I think that can get really weird and really bizarre. And yeah, I just think it gets really weird. So I think churchianity is like the epitome of that, it is the epitome of, yeah, it's just weird. Like I think of like one of my heroes in the faith, St. Patrick, and you see what St. Patrick did. St. Patrick goes to Ireland, which is predominantly not Christian. They're pagan, full on, like 95% pagan or something crazy. And he goes there and he engages them and he does everything the culture does except the pagan stuff, except the pagan worship, except the pagan idolatry, except their fault. But he engages them in the culture, right? And by the time he dies, the vast majority of Ireland is converted and is Christian.
Wow.
Right? And he doesn't go in there trying to build a new culture. No, there's things that are okay about your culture, but these things, I'm not doing the pagan worship. I'm not doing these things. These things are bad, right? And you reject the sinful parts. So I think that's the part we haven't found in America yet. We just kind of combine, we hybrid everything. So there is a conservative Christian culture. There's Christian nationalism. There's all these little weird segments, and it's very interesting because what happens is those values and the ethos of that culture, that this new hybrid culture, then become the standards which someone must live by, from the way you dress to the way you act to the music you listen to, and that's very bizarre to me.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you talk about it a lot of just like turning non-essentials into essentials of the church. And like, I think as Christians, we need to figure out like, and be able to draw that line of like, what is actually doctrine, like what is the Bible saying, and then what is just kind of our culture that we are creating. Yeah. But you also talked about, it's funny because like Ashley, my fiance, was raised Catholic, and I'm Protestant, and so the two of us, we'll have our little just like jokes about that. But it is funny how sectors of the church will believe that they are the only ones that have it right. Yes. Or maybe that their individual church is the only one that has it right. Oh, yeah. Or that their translation of the Bible. Hello. I'm looking at you, KJVs.
KJV only crowd, yeah.
They're like, if it's not the King James Version, then it's not, the truth. And I think that, I believe in the small church C. But I'm curious, like, what your stance is on all the different types of churches and why you believe so much in attending the little C church.
It's unfortunate. I don't know if God's pleased when he looks down and he sees 40,000 different Christian denominations worldwide, 300 of them active in America. I don't know if God's like, yeah. That's what I wanted.
They're all confused.
Yeah, like I don't know if that's there. So I think to me the essentials are what's clear in Scripture. Like what's fairly clear in Scripture. God created. I'm in. God Now, was it a literal 6 days of creation, or was it an old earth, the earth that he made old, or was it millions of years in between each day, or was it some form of hybrid and intelligent design? Like, I don't know, right? But there are people that be like, 6 days. The earth is 6,000 years old. And if you don't believe that, you're out. And I'm like, really? Really? Like that's, So I think it's clear God created. I think it's clear that he made man in his image. I think it's right. So I think what's clear in Scripture, and then what's like, we don't know, because if you go to the Hebrew word of that word day, it's a different word day than other parts of the Hebrew. That word day could mean an extended period of time, where if you look at other parts, there's a day that means like sunrise to sunset, like a 24-hour time span, right?
And you just blew people's mind to say that the Bible wasn't written in English as
I know,
the first
it's
language.
Crazy, right? It's crazy.
Like,
I saw a meme and it said something like Genesis 1:1, something about America, and I was like, what? Like Genesis 1:1, and it said something about like something about America. I gotta find them. I think it was on Memes for Jesus.
It was like first God made Pangea and then he split off America.
Yeah, something.
I mean, I just lost my voice there. God literally was like, "Don't be saying that."
Yeah. So I think there's clear essentials. Right? I think anybody that reads the Gospel of John, Jesus is clearly divine. Multiple times he's accepting worship. Multiple times they're trying to kill him for claiming to be God. It's fairly straightforward, right? We know that Jesus is coming back. We know that there's a Jesus coming back. That's fairly straightforward. We know that Jesus is resurrected, bodily resurrected. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't an allegory, right? And there's people that take that, did he literally rise? No, he literally rose. That was bodily, right? That happened.
He better have.
Right. So when you start coloring outside of those lines of essentials, I would say, okay, that's not Christianity. That's something else, right? The scriptures being inspired. I think that's one of the essentials. In regards to, Peter was saying Paul's letters were authoritative, right? And he said even though they're hard to understand. So I think there's a degree that like the scriptures are inspired, they're authoritative. So I think those are some of the essentials. But I think if somebody has liberty in other areas, I don't think that other areas, election, creation, 6-day creation, does God elect, double predestination, right? All of these other things I think are non-essentials. What's happening is we take whatever the things are for our camp, and then we make those essentials, and then we say everybody that isn't following what we're following is a heretic, or they're liberal. They're liberal Christians. You're a liberal. If you don't believe exactly what I believe, you're a liberal Christian. And I'm like, well, goodness, there's always going to be somebody that can say that to somebody, right? So if I'm talking to a 1,000-point Calvinist, covenantal, presuppositionalist, post-millennial, everything I say is going to be liberal according to that perspective, right? And but I think liberal is like full on, like all the way on the other end of the spectrum, egalitarian, right? And so I think that's the part where you can't just park your car one place and say, okay, everything else outside of that is out, or it's heretical, or it's off. It's like, no, Christianity is such a robust history with so many different perspectives, and people have been arguing over some of these things for thousands of years. Like how the church and government and Christians should function together has been debated for thousands of years. You're going to solve it today? Like really? Like it's all solved because you read the Bible and you got the perfect understanding and only you know the right answers. That to me is just so intellectually dishonest, right? And a lot of, it's not like these guys are scholars. It would be different if you were like a PhD scholar level, studied the Greek and the Hebrew, the Aramaic. You had a robust history understanding. No. These are like dudes. It's like dudes on the internet that are like, yeah, I got all the answers, bro. It's like, all right, man. Well, and unfortunately, these are the guys that 10 years from now start deconstructing their faith and picking apart everything. And resurrection literal or not, right? Like that, they become that. Because I remember them, the 1,000-point Calvinists from 12 years ago are all having crisis of faith, and I'm just kind of like, I told you guys. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you putting all your eggs in this basket? Like, this is wonky. Some of this stuff is good. Some of this is off. And so now this is churchianity, right? You're now taking non-essentials, you're making them essentials. And some of them won't overtly say you're not a Christian if you don't believe in these things. They'll just treat you, they'll be condescending to you. They'll make it seem like your faith is a little bit more shallow and you just don't quite understand. And it's very patronizing. So I think that's the bummer part, man. And so like I have the essentials, but I don't know some of these people. Like I was a Calvinist at one point, now not so much, right? But I still like some of the doctrines of grace. I still agree with the solas. So I think that becomes the tough part with all this stuff is it just gets very convoluted with what's essential, what's not essential.
So if that is all happening, going back to just like, because I know that you believe in the Little C Church, and I know that you have been going to the same church for a long time. So what makes you then believe so much, and you go every week, and you're probably whether you're serving now or you have served, and I mean you've worked in the church, like, so if all of that is happening in the church and people are being divided, or people are stepping up and just like believing so much in just their church, like why do you still believe in the Little C Church so much?
I think,
like, why would somebody, after hearing that, why would somebody be going to the Little C Church? Like, what is there that is not at their house?
I think what's there is community. I think what's there is the opportunity to serve people, the opportunity to be in the local ecclesia. That word church a lot of times in the New Testament, it's a local gathering. So there's a capital C church, which is kind of what you're alluding to, which I think is very big and robust. And then there's the little c, local ecclesia, local community church. And when you see them gathering in the New Testament, they're usually gathering in these local assemblies, sometimes in the Times Square, the city squares. And I think that is still like God's heart for us, right? So despite all the issues, it's you should still be a part of the family. I think Tony Evans just tweeted this, and he said, people don't want to go to church, and they say you don't have to be saved. You don't have to go to church to be saved. And he's like, yeah, you don't have to be saved to go to church. He's like, you also don't have to spend time with your wife to be married. But if you don't spend time with your wife after you're married, like your marriage is going to suffer. Your relationship is going to suffer. Over time, these things are going to deteriorate. And so I think in the same way, yeah, I don't have to go to a local siege. I don't have to. I get to be a part of a community. I get to pour myself into a local community. I get to be in fellowship. I get to do these things. I don't have to go on dates with my wife for her to be my wife. I get to go on dates with my wife. I get to hang out. Our thing is like binging shows and, finding shows to watch and binging them, and that's super fun. So I think my heart is that people would be in community. People would have opportunities to utilize their spiritual gifts. People would have the opportunity to serve. And I do believe God uses churches and the capital C church to serve people. And a lot of people are like, yo, Bedside Baptist, bro. I'm just going to roll over, find my favorite preacher, and there's my church. Well, yeah, but you should still be plugged into some type of community. I also think those communities serve a ton of practical utility. So when you're talking, well, where do you go for counsel? Where are your elders? Who can you ask questions to? Who's gonna marry you? How about that? Like, you want to get married? Who's gonna marry you? Well, if you're not in the local church, we're just gonna like rent a reverend. Like, I'm $2.99. I'm gonna rent a reverend. Some random guy I've never met. He's gonna show up in a $50 tux and marry me, right? Like, okay. And again, by the way, so anyone hearing this, everything I said is the main thing. Here are just some practical utilities. Going through, getting in a community group and Bible study, having friends, right? I'm sure, as you know, now in your 30s, it gets harder and harder and harder to maintain friendships when you get older. Yeah. It's tough. There's a practical utility to building friendships. Being around people that are different, right? If you go to that sounds shallow. If you go to a diverse, multi-generational, multi-ethnic church, there's a lot of value to being around people that are different than you,
yes,
to being around people that are coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds than you, and learning from people. So I think there's also a ton of practical utility that's often overlooked. And I don't think God made us to be alone. So yes, there's marriage and family, but you also need friends. You also need community. You also need people that are going to ask you hard questions sometimes. You also need people that are going to point out your blind spots. That's another thing is we don't talk about enough. Like, people have blind spots, man. And if it wasn't for the local C church, like, I would be a train wreck of a person if it wasn't for people gently, hey man, like, you might want to look at this a different way. Hey man, like, and I think that's from the local C church.
Yeah, and one of the stats I remember you saying in one of your videos was that for every new person coming into the church, there are 4 people leaving the church. Yeah. And like you said, your friend or that guy out there who is talking one way today, in a couple of years is going to be the same guy who's deconstructing his faith. And I think a lot of people leave the church for that reason. And you talk about like traveling long, traveling light, and not letting the little things get you caught up. Yep. But I also, this is something for me personally where I have a friend who has left the church now because of almost like a Job scenario where it's like life has just hit this person time after time, where it's losing friends and family, like a lot of deaths back to back to back, and just like in weird, unexpected ways. It is going through abusive relationships and getting raped multiple times, and having all of this trauma in their life. And for a while, this person was explaining to me, I just said, you know what? I can use this for my story. This sucks, but I can use this as my testimony. But then it comes to a point where you break. I mean, like, I've had crap happen to me. You've had crap happen to you. But like, when I hear this person's story, and I've only grazed the surface on this, but it's like, and I've had multiple people like that in my life. You know, I had a friend who literally started coming to the faith. I'm getting emotional just talking about it. And, you know, he started coming to church with me. He went and served with me. And then, like, I felt like it was finally starting to click for him. And then his grandfather took his life. And he, like, came home and found his grandfather. He was the one to find him. And his grandfather was, like, a diehard Christian.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's like, when stuff like that happens, like, okay, what do you say to somebody like that? Like, how do you help someone like that? I don't know if you've had somebody in your life like that, but, like, what is the message to that person? You know, I mean, because, you know, when I'm texting my friend, I'm like, what do you say? Like, how do you help them? I don't know if you have any practical advice for anybody, you know, who's just kind of like sitting there and thinking, like, life has hit me hard, and they have pulled away from the church because of it.
Yeah, I don't think you say anything. I think you listen. I think you just listen. What am I gonna say? What do I got? I got nothing, dude. I got not like. I think you don't say anything. I think you just listen. I think you be present. You sit. What do you know? I think practically, when someone's going through it, I don't think you say. Do you need anything? I think you provide options. Hey, man, can I come by? Bring you some water. You know, if you know their favorite food place, can I bring you by some food? Like, give them things, like practical things. Can I take you here? Can I do? Like, I think you press in and you meet that need. I don't think you say anything, because I think when someone's going through that degree of trauma, I don't think there's anything you say. I think you just, and you let them know, hey, I'm praying for you. You know, trying to not. I don't say if you need anything. I say, can I bring you by something? Can we go hang out? Can we go on a walk? Right. And I think when there's that practical need being met. This is a friend, right? Like, I'm not trying to, like, keep you in the church, like, just as a homie, like, you know. And so I think when my friends are going through it, I try to give them very specific things I could do for them. Can I come by? Can I bring you some food? Can I do that? So I think that is what I would say. I don't think I have the answers in those moments. I think if we're talking my ideas around that, if somebody starts asking, I think that's when you know, I would say, man, we can't control. We can control what we can control. You can control the variables that you can control. All of this is subject to when life throws tragedy at you. When life throws tragedy and setback at you. And I don't have to go further than the cross to see the greatest injustice happen. When you see Jesus on the cross and you're like, dude, this was like a guy that did everything right. He literally did everything right. And yet he dies this brutal, terrible death. And if that's not unjust, if that's not suffering, if that's not good things, bad things, terrible things happen to a great person, a perfect person, I don't know what is, right? And so I think there is going to be bad things. Jesus tells us that. In this world, you will experience suffering. You will experience trouble. How we process that, I have to go back to the cross. I don't have no other filters. I have to go back to the cross. And in my life, I've gone through trauma as a kid. I've gone through stuff, you know, financial stuff. The thing that helps me is understanding that, and understanding that a lot of times going through that suffering developed me, right? So my mother broke her shoulder right before the pandemic, like, really popped off.
Oh no.
My mother has bad hips. Me and her were kind of estranged for a bit, and she fell because she didn't want to get her hips fixed, and she was walking with her canes, and she got these stupid little Chihuahua dogs, and she fell and like completely broke her entire right shoulder. And it took her like a day to call me, right? And I remember, like, okay, I'm gonna go by there, and she's like, I think it's dislocated. Can you look and see if you could pop it back in place? I'm like, and we got to go to the ER. Like, this isn't dislocated. Like, and my mother has a really high tolerance of pain. And so we go to the ER, and we find out it's like way worse than she thought. It's not dislocated. She was like, can you just pop it into place? They're like, no. Like, and they would have operated on her that night if it wasn't for COVID hitting and if it wasn't for not having insurance.
Wow.
So here I am with my mom at the emergency room, right as COVID, everything is shutting down. I'm at the emergency room. She doesn't have insurance. And I literally, this is over a year ago, I literally had to like take over all of her affairs. I had to figure out her insurance. I had to figure out her disability. I had to clean her house. I had to walk her dogs. Every single day I was there. And I remember at one point, like hitting like a low, like not a low for me. I'm fine financially, but like, man, like I'm literally over here like caring for my mom in the most, you know, use your imagination, like in the most like tough ways as a son. But the flip side of all that is that she got her shoulder fixed, she got her hips fixed, she slowed down on the drinking. We're reconciled. And on the other side of that, there is some degree of hope that she's going to get sober and she's going to continue on this path. And all of that is great. But I think what it did to me is extend my own capacity to weep with those who are weeping, to cry with those, right? It expands that capacity to have empathy for people. And it's through those unpleasant times that I think that happens. It's not through mountaintop experiences, right? You don't really learn anything when you're winning. What do you learn? Like, you're like, yeah, life's good. Nothing. You don't learn anything there. But when you're in those valleys, man, I think that's when you learn stuff. When your character gets revealed, and when you get chiseled and like you transform as in that suffering. And that's weird to say. Like, that's weird to say that in suffering there is purpose, because it seems so counterintuitive. But in my life, it's always been that way. It's always been the you know, and I don't like reading the scriptures and always seeing myself as the hero. So that's not what I'm trying to do here, because a lot of people do that. They read the scriptures and they're like, I'm David fighting Goliath, right? My problems are my enemies are my problems, and I don't like doing that. But the story of Joseph, when Joseph gets sold into slavery by his brothers, and he goes decades without seeing them, and then he finally, his dreams fulfilled in his whole thing, and he tells his brothers, like, it's okay, that what you meant for evil for me, God used for good. And I think when I look at the cross, that which the enemy meant for evil, and people who at one point were probably worshiping and following Jesus were then sitting there scoffing and mocking him while he was on the cross, that which you meant for evil, God used for good. And Romans 8:28, it says all things work for good for those who love God and are called according to his purposes. And so we can't control what tragedy life is going to throw at us. And we could sit here and there's just personal things that's happened. And there's a pastor acquaintance right now, 5 little kids, just lost his wife, you know, and all the kids are under 6. And you're just like, gosh, like what is that? Like, how do you process that? And it doesn't make sense. But I don't have to look much further than the cross for it not to make sense. I don't, you know, and I'm sure that's how the disciples felt. I'm sure the disciples were like, what? Like, we were expecting you to establish a kingdom. Like, you were going to overthrow Rome. I know you didn't say that, but like, that's what we wanted. And then Jesus is naked, nailed to a cross. His mother's there, and he's suffering, asking God, why have you forsaken me? Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And so I know that Jesus can relate to my suffering because he suffered more than I ever will. And I think in that, I make some sense of it. I don't know how to make sense of it, but I think that helps me make sense. I can't make sense of all of it because I don't understand all of it. I don't think we will understand all of it in the light of eternity. But I think that's as close as I can get. So just say, well, that doesn't make sense. A good person dying for bad people, like at the hands of bad people, that makes zero sense to me. But now that I'm born again, it starts to make more and more sense. And I think when we get to heaven, all of the tragedy will make more and more sense, even though it's so unpleasant in the moment. I'm not trying to minimize people's suffering. But I don't always understand it, man. I don't get it, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's it. I mean, when we get to heaven, I'm sure all of this we'll see the master plan behind it all.
Yeah.
And it'll be like, oh, okay. But man, like right now it is tough. And one of the things you said that you do, not only just like listening to the person, but praying. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of Christians out there that prayer is something that they do Sunday mornings in church. Maybe sometimes prayer is something you do before a meal. Maybe prayer is something you do before you go to sleep. But I feel like you talk about the power of prayer.
Yeah.
And you don't talk about it in a way that makes me think, oh, Ruslan and his family are just sitting down before meals and praying, you know, a short little prayer, and then boom, that's it. That's the only time you're talking to God. Like, I feel like you are praying in a big and powerful way. Like, what does that mean, the power of prayer, to somebody who maybe hasn't tapped in to that type of conversation with God?
I think it's more subtle than that. I think it's big and powerful on the other side of it. I think in the moment, it's a lot of crying prayers when you're suffering. Like, why, Lord? Like, what the heck? I think there's that. And I think we need a good cry prayer, right? Most people don't cry enough. I think we need a good, like, cry prayer. I think, to me, the verse that's always stuck with me is pray without ceasing, which is, to me, means, I think this is what it means. It's to always be in a spirit of prayer, always be communicating with God, always be. So it's not like I'm doing these like, oh, thou art God who art in heaven prayers all the time in my head. It's that I'm always communicating, right? So I'm always thinking, I'm always praying for things. And it's more so like, how can I kind of remain in that place of prayer? How can I remain aligned with the Holy Spirit, which lives in me? How can I remain in that throughout my day, and not just in these like isolated moments of like, now we're going to sit down and pray, then we're going to pray at church. Prayer journals really helped, writing down my prayers. And you'd be surprised if you just write down your prayers and look back at them in a month, or write down your prayers, look back at them in 6 months. A lot of stuff gets answered. A lot of stuff gets worked out, man. And it's really, 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 really interesting. But we always forget. That's the thing about life and humans. We forget way more than we remember. That's why you see all throughout the Old Testament, God's like, I am the God of Abraham. I am the God that took you out of Egypt. I am the God that did this for you. It's like, look, like, remember me. Like, if I did this for you, I'm going to get you through this. And that's how I always look at it. If God can get me from where I was to where I'm at, God, I mean, he can literally do the impossible. He could do anything.
Yes.
So writing down prayers, remembering silly things like, even posting photos on Instagram and going back and looking at them, even having photos in your camera roll, even, videos, right? Going back and remembering where I was at the last time we went to Disneyland. And I was in a completely different spot. You know, I was in a darker spot, and now this trip is way different. And I'll probably look back at this trip and be like, oh my gosh, all these worries I had, now God really delivered. Like, he really got me through this stuff, you know? So, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure, like, I'll look back at this moment and the fear around going to Florida and the COVID rates and my own, like, man, I want to get us into a house. I want to, right? Like, I want to, all these different things. And I'll probably look back at this 4 or 5 years from now and be like, man, like, God was really faithful, and it all kind of worked out, all worked together for good.
Yeah, except for he didn't work out Lululemon for you the other night, right?
Oh, I think I'm going to go back.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to Lulu.
Okay, so the other night I was thinking Lululemon was an MLM, but I was thinking of Lulu Row, which is an MLM, and I was confusing it with that. And so when you were like, I'm looking for Lululemon, I was like, is Ruslan about to get us into some pyramid scheme tonight?
That was the real agenda for coming here?
Yeah.
It's like, yo, guys, I got this thing.
He's like, oh, you think I'm coming on your podcast? I'm about to get y'all boys.
I really need you guys to sell whole life insurance policies with me.
Oh, my gosh.
The commissions are great if you get people to sign up underneath you.
Well, the other night, though, speaking of being down at Disney Springs, we're sitting there at dinner, which we took you to what I would say is one of the best restaurants.
Amazing.
Yeah, the Boathouse. Phenomenal.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Good call.
highly recommend the Boathouse to anybody coming to Disney Springs. But we're sitting there, and it's me, you, and James, and I realize, like, have you ever been in, like, a room or a conversation where you realize, like, you're the dumbest person there?
All the time.
Like,
all the time.
Like, I was so humbled to be sitting there, and I'm just listening to your guys' conversation, and I'm just eating away at my truffle fries and my crab cakes, and you guys are saying these words that are just like flying over my head. But it was good for me, you know, and even this podcast is good for me because I get to sit across from guys like you, and it's like a free education for me over here. But one of the things you talked about, which is a really popular podcast right now in the Christian world called Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. And I know that you kind of had a take on it. Like I said, I was kind of oblivious to what was going on, but it looked like James was reacting to what you were saying. And so I was like, oh, this is good stuff. I better type this up and talk to him about it. So can you share your take on it? And I'm also going to just stop talking now because everybody's like, he's an idiot.
Yeah, I think... Well, you're not an idiot, first of all.
Well, thank you.
I think we view the world in good guys and bad guys, heroes, villains, victims, guides, and everything. We need a category for everyone. This person's the hero. This person's the villain. This person's the guide to the hero. This person is the victim that needs to be rescued. And I don't think life is that clean. I don't think anything is that linear. I think in my life, I've been all the above. I think I was a victim as a child. I think I've been a villain. I think I've been a hero to some. And I think I'm a guide for other people, right? And we want the story to be linear. That is good storytelling. Every story has that. A hero who's trying to find himself on this journey to save the victim, and the guide is helping the hero to figure himself out. The hero has this moment. He defeats the villain. The villain fades away. The hero, right? It's very linear. I don't think that's life. I don't think that's my life. I don't think that's anybody's life. I think we've all been on the spectrum. And so I think when I listen to that podcast, I think we really do ourselves a disservice by trying to position people into those specific boxes. All of us have blind spots. All of us make mistakes. And I think when you see these phenomenons like the megachurch, when you see these phenomenons like pan-social activities, which is what I try to stay away from. Pan-social is when people just watch their favorite influencers live. And I'm like, nope, you're going to call into a Zoom call, and I'm going to get to know you. And if I see you in the street, we're going to go get coffee. Like, we're not going to do this weird, like, cult of personality Ruslan thing, right? Like, I'm not a fan of that. I want to actually meet people. And I get it. It's not scalable. I understand that. But I want to create some degree of normalcy with my platform. It's a whole nother point. But I say all that to say that when I listen to that, I think we've created an environment and we've created a culture for people to plant churches at 26 years old who are highly gifted communicators, very entrepreneurial, amazing, brilliant speakers, are able to retain information and communicate it in a way that makes sense. We've created a culture in Christendom because of maybe the idolatry in our own hearts where we elevate guys like that, like Driscoll. Not just Driscoll, just one of hundreds of guys. And we promote them and then get mad at them when they fail. The Baby, talked about him earlier. We promoted a rapper who, in self-defense, shot quite a few people and is very misogynistic and has a history of violence. We've promoted them, and then he said the wrong thing about the LGBTQ community and then canceled him. That's what we do. We promote people to the position of kings because there's that idolatry in our heart. We like the children of Israel wanting a king, and God's like, bad idea. No, we really want a king. We want to be like the other nations. Okay. And then they get Saul, right? And so I think what the rise and fall of Mars Hill is it's a mirror, man. That's like, you can't villainize one person and be like, he's a bad guy. Bro, at 26, I am so happy I wasn't successful at 26. This dude planted a mega church at 26 years old. And he is incredibly talented, incredibly gifted. And I've met him before. He's super humble when I met him. Great, like genuine guy. Sat there, talked with me for hours. Super cool guy, post Mars Hill. And I think it's a mirror. I think the rise and fall of Mars Hill is a mirror. And I think we need to look at that mirror and say, what is it in our hearts that we keep wanting these guys to be these celebrities? And I think it's good because I think there's also people that aren't planting churches at freaking 27 or 26 years old. And I went through a similar thing with the pastor at the church I'm still at. The head pastor stepped down. He planted a church at like 27, 28, very gifted communicator, very charismatic, entrepreneurial. Church blows up. He makes some poor financial decisions and is forced to step down, right? So I've gone through it. Thankfully, I wasn't on staff at the church then, but that was messy and almost ended our church. It didn't, thankfully. It's a miracle that we made it through all that. Financially irresponsible, making some poor decisions, domineering leadership style, like, in my opinion, a lot worse than what I heard on that podcast. But that's the wickedness in our own heart, right? And then the person's just like, oh, yeah, I'll go with it. I guess this is working. I'm good at this. Oh, and I think they also believe that God called them to help people. And that's not to say there shouldn't be accountability. There should. I just don't know how to navigate all that. I think that was I think that episode 2 was the best when they talk about the history and the founders myth and how mega churches came to be and how prior to, I think, 1970, there was like maybe a dozen mega churches, and then afterwards there's like thousands of mega churches because of the people moving back into the suburbs. People moved back into the suburbs, church exploded, and then like now you see people moving back into the cities in the 2000s, and then that's how Mars Hill exploded. I think so many of these things are like changing demographics and the explosion of YouTube, which is really how he kind of got his platform. Mars Hill was early on YouTube. I didn't think episode 5 was fair at all. I think episode 5 was, they made him out to be this like, they kept using the word pornographic. Mars Hill was pornographic. And I was like, dude, I went through those series. I went through Peasant Princess, verse by verse. Me and my wife did. I went through that stuff. And never did I walk away with any of that stuff thinking, woman, get on your knees and give me head whenever I demand it. Like, what? If anything, it was love your wife until she's lovely. Cultivate a marriage where intimacy is flourishing and thriving. And so I think episode 5 was a bit disingenuous on their part. I don't think that was fair. Because that's not what I walked away with. Like, I genuinely walked away loving my wife better. And even in the whole, like, Song of Solomon, this is Christians, Christian dancing, a woman dancing for a husband. This is the biblical mandate for dancing. This is the biblical mandate for oral sex, right? And he didn't say mandate. He said something. I don't remember what the word he was. Precedent. This is the precedent for biblical, right? But it was like, build your marriage so that it can get to a place where your wife feels comfortable someday dancing for you with the lights on. Not, you need to do this for me, woman, right? Like that wasn't the application points of any of those messages from when I went through them, and neither was it for my wife. So I wish my wife would strip for me every night, right? Like, but that's not how those messages were applied. Like, that's not what it was. So I think that was a bit misrepresentative of what the actual, and it's also tough to slice through, like, where is he joking and being and like inflating and being hyperbolic, and when is he teaching application points? I think that's also gets a little lost in context, because yes, you hear stuff back in hindsight and you're like, oh my gosh, can't believe he said that. It's like, yeah, but you just did a whole episode on how he got his communication style from watching comedians. Like, that's intentional. There's some humor in there intentionally. So yeah, I don't know. So that I would say that, and it's not to say like there's no lines or whatever. It's just say, hey, don't follow guys in their early 30s who are megachurch pastors. Like, don't follow. Like, I'm so grateful that I did not become successful until my mid 30s, and even still, I'm like, Lord, this is some scary stuff that I have this much influence. Let me point to other people. God, you guys go watch Alan Parr. He's in his 40s. You guys like me? Check out Rhythm Church. My buddy Jeff is in his 40s. Like, I'm always pointing to other people, because it's a lot of, having that much influence at that age, even in my mid 30s, I'm like, man, this is some scary stuff. And that's, unfortunately, the church does that. It promotes people who are charismatic. It promotes people who are certain. There's a lot of certainty in what he was saying. And that it comes across as very reassuring, and it doesn't always flesh out well. So I think that whole thing is a reflection on us, man, honestly. And again, that doesn't mean he doesn't need to be held accountable and whatever those parameters are. Yeah, all that. I think he's worked through a lot of stuff. But I think I don't think that stuff was very. I think episode 2 was really good. The Lonnie Frisbee stuff was crazy. I think episode 5 I was the most disappointed in. I was like, you guys are reaching for straws. Like, you're just saying stuff, and it sounds like this is what it was. And maybe it was for the people there. Maybe the women there felt like they have to give their husbands oral sex every other night and did strip for them. Maybe that's a thing. That is not how me or any of my friends walked away with having read the books. My wife read Real Marriage. She went and took a picture with them. And I was like, babe, when are you going to strip for me? Like, you read this Mark Driscoll. This is what he said, right? That still hasn't happened. So, again, like, I think there was a little bit of reaching on episode 5. I thought episode 2 was the best one. I think it's really well put together. And it also brings up the point of, like, why are we rehashing this now? Like, is there an agenda here? What's the point here? Yeah. It's a fascinating story, but it's one of hundreds of stories. That's not a unique story. That's a very common story, because I think we have this thing in our hearts to want the guy to be on a platform and to let the guy who's confident and with all this certainty tell us what to do and simplify our faith. And I think faith is there's a lot more nuance there.
Yeah. Man, I was hoping that you would say, I want my wife to strip for me one more time, so we could have done a full blooper reel of just you. I'm kidding. We won't make anything that spicy, but I do want to jump into your marriage.
Okay.
Now, I know that your Instagram and, all celebrities, they want everything to look like, their world is picture perfect. Their marriage is all, roses and diamonds. But I know that there are struggles in every relationship. Have you and Monette had any kind of struggles that you've had to get through in your relationship?
No. I've never had any struggles.
All right, moving on.
In my relationship ever. Yes, of course. So having been a survivor of sexual assault when I was a kid, there was definitely some trauma that I brought into our marriage, and it was hard for me to understand how many issues I had prior to getting married. And it wasn't until in marriage that I discovered, man, like, I'm still wrestling with a lot of porn addiction and a lot of things that are super heavy that I didn't understand how bad it was until being on the other side of being married. And I bought into the myth that, like, once you get married, marriage and sex in marriage is just going to solve all your problems. Totally not what happened. And I wish I would have gotten help and got therapy and got counseling and all that kind of stuff before getting married. I think that probably would have been very, very healthy. But you just don't know what you don't know. So in 2008, when I got married, therapy wasn't something we talked about a whole lot. Sex addiction wasn't something we talked about a whole lot. I knew porn was bad, but it was just as deep as it went. Like, porn bad, lust bad, but not like understanding that lust and porn are symptoms, and a lot of times not the actual issue. And the issue is deeper than just like, oh, I like looking at naked girls. It's like, no, it was deeper than that for me. And I took that into marriage. And at one point I had to confess, like, this is still a struggle for me, and it was hard. But it was the first step to freedom and liberation in that area. And it was a journey, but man, I'm so grateful having gone through like that tension and her like not knowing how to process it initially, and now being in a much better place by the grace of God.
So we're here with Instagram Live, and all your listeners are wanting to know, like, the big question that keeps popping up is, how do you continue to date your wife into the marriage?
Especially when you have little kids, which can be hard.
Yes.
And there's certain things that are great about Christians and Christian culture. And a lot of times it's like, you need a date night every night with your wife. You should date your wife every night. And it's like, not night, every week. Every week you should have.
I was like, wow.
Every night would be cool too. But when you have kids, little kids, when you are broke, when you're trying to be frugal, that could be very, very difficult to do. And so we have amazing friends close by and even family that's offered, hey, like, if you guys want to go on a date night, like, you can drop the kids off. And when you have a baby, like we have a 4-month-old Zoe, right? And the same thing with Levi. Like, we don't really want to leave our babies with anybody. Like, we don't trust a lot of y'all. so there's that. And then there's the physical, like just leaving a baby with someone for a couple hours to go and have dinner and a movie. So what we've done, this is just what works for us, is when we put the kids to sleep, our favorite pastime is binging shows together. So every night, say 9 out of 10 nights we're together watching shows. The kids are asleep, and Levi goes to bed around 7:30. Zoe's a baby, so she's kind of in and out of sleep, and we just watch shows every night. We eat dinner together every night, and it doesn't have to be this big dress up. You need to go on a date and go have dinner and do this thing. We do it every night, and in the process, I don't know if this happened before or after we started doing this, but I discovered that they've done studies, and couples who binge watch shows together actually feel more connected and closer together, and it's like one of the most beneficial things you could do.
Really?
For your marriage is binge watch shows together.
Wow, that kind of like shocks me, because I feel like a lot of the things I hear is like you got to be physical with your significant other, and I'm not talking about in the bedroom. I'm saying like going out and doing exercises or going to events or climbing, whatever. I know for Ashley and I, we've been using the Adventure book. I don't know if you've heard of that. They have one for couples. They have one for families. And you can just like scratch off mystery dates. So yesterday we ended up painting portraits of each other from across.
Aww.
So we were sitting like this. We're painting portraits. Mine looked horrible of her. It was embarrassing. but you're painting, and then you were supposed to play classical music. You were supposed to dress up nice. And then we had like little glasses of wine that we were drinking. Yeah. It was really nice, and we ended up liking them enough. She fixed mine and doctored it enough to where we can put them on the wall. So and it's fun little dates like that, and they're pretty cheap. So that's kind of been our way. But I feel like going into marriage, you got to continue to, like you said, date your wife, find those things that connect you. But I feel like, you run into problems like the porn addiction or whatever, like those big problems. And sometimes you kind of bring on the problem. Like I know you were talking about at dinner the other night where some people bring on the problem by just having kid after kid after kid after kid. And then that just kind of like rips their whole family apart. And I know that you had an interesting take on not just having child after child after child. Can you share that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like I'm all for whatever people want to do in their marriage.
Okay? Right.
Whatever. If you guys want to have 10 kids, like respect, like have 10 kids. I think in Christian culture, there is this very literal be fruitful and multiply. Be fruitful and multiply. And I mean, even to some theologies that go to the very extreme of things where they say you should have kids primarily to procreate, or you shouldn't use barrier methods, or you should, right? And I think there's a spectrum within that. In my experience, we don't have a ton of family close by us. Like we don't have like, a mother-in-law that lives with us that we can trust our kids with. We don't. The grandparents are 30 minutes away, so we don't have a ton of people close by us. We don't have a nanny, and we were broke for a long time, right? So within the last couple of years, so I think this idea of having as many kids as you can be good for certain people who may make a lot of money and who may be able to really take care of those kids and afford to have those kids and it not be a strain on their marriage. For us, we waited 6 years before we had Levi. That's a long time for most people. And I'm glad we did, because by the time we had Levi, we were out of debt. My wife was able to stay home. I was able to, pursue music 6 months after having him full time. And because we waited, it positioned us to have more stability than had we jumped in year one, had a baby. And then we waited another 6 years to have Zoe. And now we're in a completely even better place with having Zoe. And I think sometimes when you have a ton of kids back to back to back to back, you can put that unnecessary pressure, that unnecessary tension on your body, on your marriage, on your physical health. And yes, kids are a blessing. Amen. but you got to know your own capacity and your own limits. And again, this is all subjective, and there's different people that are going to have different standards and different people that are going to have things. But for us, we knew early on, like, yeah, we're not just going to pump out a bunch of kids just because that's the thing to do as a young Christian couple. That's not who we are. And I'm so glad we didn't. I'm so glad we didn't. And I don't know if we're going to have any more kids, to be honest with you. Like, I'm pumped with 2. I think my wife is pumped with 2. Maybe we'll adopt some kids at some point. But I think I'm good, man. And again, every time you have kids, there's sacrifice that comes with that. And there's nothing wrong with sacrifice, but at some point, like if you're having kids as a dude, just hypothetically, and it's driving you back deeper into lust. And it's not to say that it's your wife's fault or it's the baby's fault, but if there's a correlation there, right? I think you might want to stop and or at least go get help. Which then again, if you're having a bunch of kids, can you afford therapy and counseling and treatment? If there's a correlation there, and so I'm so happy we did not have a bunch of kids. And I think there's a lot of pressure, man, especially on young Christian couples to just like, yeah, many kids as you can, as soon as you can. And kids are amazing, but having them when you can take care of them and pour into them and really be present with them and have the pace of life where your marriage is still flourishing and thriving. And that's the cool part, man, is like this time around, me and Monette are in a amazingly healthy place with Zoe. And it wasn't like that with Levi. It was still hard with Levi because it was new. We didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
With Zoe, it's a little bit more like, all right, cool. We have a rhythm to our marriage. We have a rhythm to our binging shows, right? She has a rhythm as a mom with nursing. Levi is going to bed at a reasonable time. And so I think there's that pressure on a lot of young Christian folks to just have as many. And again, that comes with a cost, right? And if you could afford it, both mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, like if you could afford it, respect, man. Have as many as you want. There's no judgment here. Just don't be looking at me crazy because I only got 2.
So the listeners are now wondering what your take is on birth control.
All right. We're going to go there, huh?
Yeah. That's not where I was going to go, but that's where your fans want to take it.
Yeah. So we initially did birth control as like a pill, and we decided not to. We decided there was some research that suggested some things that we ethically didn't align with. And I also just wasn't a fan of kind of how it made my wife. It just, I don't know.
It does things.
It does things. And I love it when she's fertile. It's fun. She's fun. So we don't do any birth control. We just use a barrier method. We keep track of her cycle through, well, she keeps track. I don't keep track of anything. She keeps track of her cycle through like a calendar app thing. Okay. And then on the days she's fertile, we use a barrier method, condoms, and then we're chilling, the rest of the time. And so for me, it works. It's fun. And I'm also not opposed to getting a vasectomy at some point if that it's kind of where we're leaning now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, we're going to get deep with you, I feel like, with your fans. Like, they really want to know some, like, what's going on in the bedroom with Ruslan. But I was curious because I see a lot of families, they have a bunch of kids, and then they focus so much on the love for their children that they forget about the love for each other and why they even got married in the first place, why they even started having kids. But one thing with parenting, because I think you and I experience a different type of parenting from like a couple of guests ago. We had Shama. Shama was very sheltered. He, was every little thing had to be like picked out by his parents. Probably couldn't watch Harry Potter. You can't watch, I don't know, Pocahontas, whatever those things are. You're watching Veggie Tales. Like,
shout out to all the Christians that can't go to Magic Kingdom because the word magic's in it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness! I never even thought about that. Yeah. But I call those the bubbled Bible believers.
Respect
those families. Whereas then you have the other families, and I want to make sure that this gets corrected because I need my mom to know, like, I think everything of her. Like, she is an amazing mother, and her parenting style was very different in the sense that she gave me a lot of freedom. And that's not to say that there was neglect and abandon, but there was a lot of trust. And she had the faith in me and gave me freedom to kind of live and do what I wanted to do as a kid. You know, I went off skateboarding with my friends on the weekends at the skate park, and she trusted me, you know. And I think that those two different parenting styles are what I see the majority of parents do. It's either very strict, rules, do it this way, and then when they grow up, it's either they continue to follow down those rules and they find their own faith, not just one that has been preached to them, or they go super far the other way and they rebel hard.
Yep.
Whereas on the other side, like me and you, we had a lot of freedom. You know, our parents loved us, but you can either grow up and say, you know what, I'm going to be reckless. Like, I've got all this freedom. I can do whatever I want. And you can become that kid that turns into an adult that never really grows up and mans up. Or you can realize, you know what, like, my parents love me and they gave me this freedom, and now I'm going to use it in the best way possible. So, like, where's your stance? Where do you find yourself parenting? Are you more the bubble side, or are you more the freedom side?
Well, Levi is 6. So there's,
he has to be bubbled.
Yeah, he's bubbled. He's
bubbled. Going forward,
I don't. We're trying to figure out. I think it's a best of both worlds, right? So I think there's things that he's going to experience. There's going to be things he sees, and I think my heart is, how can I preemptively articulate God's heart for these different things before someone else gets to explain these things? I'll give you an example. My parents never had a sex conversation with me, ever. Like, we just didn't talk about it, right? And just kind of assumed you knew what was going on, and then you just learn about sex in the most debaucherous, godless way, as did I. So with Levi, I mean, we early on started having conversations. I believe in conversations, not a talk. So we had multiple conversations about, we start with just, when he was maybe like 4 or 3, he started talking about where babies come from. We started talking about the biology, and daddy has the sperm and mommy has the egg, and the sperm goes into mommy and then the baby, right? And then he saw his sister being born at 6, so he understands that a baby comes out of a mommy's vagina, right? He understands a lot of things for his age that I think a lot of kids don't quite understand. So we haven't talked about like the actual act of intercourse and what that all entails. But so we're having a series of conversations to the capacity that he could understand. And we're going to continue having those conversations and explaining God's heart and how it all works together, so that there's not this like just dump of information all at once and then he's overwhelmed. And I think that's my heart, is like, how can I curate his heart for living God's way in a way that actually is fruitful and beneficial, and it's not 100% in a bubble, and it's also not lawless and just kind of like, yeah, dude, just go figure it out, right? Because I think with God, for me, it's always been an and both. There's parameters on certain things that I just didn't do because when I got saved, and then there's other things that I just like, unfortunately, had to learn through some trial and error, right? A lot of boundaries emotionally. I had to kind of make a mess of things and figure things out, right? And then there's other things that I just kind of knew, like, okay, now that I'm a Christian, I'm not supposed to have intercourse. I'm gonna wait until I'm married, right? So I think there's a healthy tension there that I'm excited to navigate. And I know I'm not going to get it perfect. So we do curate, we do homeschool. My wife is an amazing mom, amazing educator. And so we do homeschool and we do those things. And I think it's a and both, not either or. And I think when it comes to the world, which is where a lot of people really start freaking out, like, well, what about this? What about that? A lot of that, like where Disneyland Magic Kingdom, like he's going to see different people. He's going to see different things. And he's very shrewd in that he knows when to just mind his business. He just knows, like there's been multiple kids that you could tell are on the spectrum, but you maybe not tell like based on how they look, but on their behavior. And you could tell someone's having a meltdown, they're on the spectrum. We have friends that are on the spectrum. Yeah. And he just knows to just not acknowledge it and to just mind his business and not make a fuss. He might see some people from alternative lifestyles and he just minds his business, right? He just knows to just mind his business sometimes. And I think which is again 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul is like, hey, like mind your business. You're in the church, you're a Christian, you need to mind your business sometimes. And I think he is already exhibiting that at an early age, which is helpful, because if you're a parent and you're sitting there across and your kid's having a meltdown, and there's a kid over there and he's not asking, mean questions. What's wrong with him, Daddy? Why is he this way, right? And he just doesn't do that, man. And he's just he's a shrewd kid very early on with that regard.
Yeah, I think that finding that balance between lawlessness and legalist is what parents need to find.
Yeah.
Because, the biblical, raising your kid up in the ways of the Bible, the Bible made me do it, kind of teaching, but then also realizing that God gave us free will. Like God allows us to make those mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where I loved, and I'm just now realizing how good my mom was at parenting me, because she would teach me all of the things of the Bible, throughout. And so I knew about Jesus, I knew about the Bible, but then she was also not that parent that was restricting me from experiencing the world. And I wonder now, because if you don't experience things in life, then you're always wondering about it. I still wonder to this day about marijuana, because I've never smoked weed. And I'm thinking, if I didn't go through that in high school or some in college, would I now as an adult be wondering about those things? So an amazing question has come in about how you would teach your kids about the topic of sexuality in today's culture, with that kind of being the norm, the conversation that's going on.
I think, again, we've been talking about sexuality, but we started from biology, right? So we're talking sperm, egg, mommy, daddy, so on and so forth. So I think sometimes we just want to go straight for the Christian ethical sex conversation. I mean, there's a natural law of how these things also work, right? And sometimes just explaining, this is how babies are made, this is how you procreate. Starting that conversation earlier, I think for us so far has been helpful. Having that conversation earlier has been helpful. And just explaining, hey, this is the Christian sex ethic. This is what it is. This is how a man and a woman come together, procreate, have babies, and husband and wife. And again, as he gets older, we'll explain pleasure to him. We'll explain all the other things around sex that are, oneness and coming together in that way. So I think it's less, again, not a talk, but talks. We talk about this stuff all the time in different ways, to the capacity which he can understand at 6 years old. Again, he's 6 years old, so it's
right.
Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. We're not having that conversation at 6, And I think if there's a groundwork laid out for marriage, for what the point of marriage is, the point of family is, the point of intimacy is, children, how amazing all that is. I think a lot of this stuff is you just kind of connect the dots, and you figure it out. And to keep it all the way a buck, my son's not in public school. There's a reason for that, right? Because I think there's a difference between hey, we should treat all people as image bearers with dignity, respect, and honor. We shouldn't bully anybody for whatever choices they've made. However, the moment you start pushing your morals onto me and saying, no, he has to learn this in school, or this has to be this way, I think that's when that's then the pushback to some of the fundamentalism, right? It's both sides want to legislate their morality. The fundamentalists want to legislate the Bible in school and all these kind of things. And it's okay, I could see some value for that. I could see that vibe. And then the people that are on the far end of the spectrum, what I would say the leftists, right? Not liberal, but leftists, all the way on the spectrum. No, you have to say this is the same as a heterosexual marriage. You have to say this is the same as a regular family. You have to say these things the same. And that's where I go, no, I don't. No, I don't. We're just going to homeschool, And if I was in public school, I would just opt my kids out of that. Which, by the way, that's a whole other conversation where people are they're going to indoctrinate. No, you can opt out. You can really opt out of those conversations. You can. How am I going to navigate the LGBTQ conversation with my son? Honestly, I don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet. We haven't gotten that far yet. I have no idea how we're going to navigate that conversation. My opinion, my gut with all these things is, if I can explain my heart and God's heart for what God is for and what God is about and the beauty and the way God ordered the universe, I think there's less of a need to be this is what he's against. This is what he's against. And I think we got to be clear on what isn't of God. But I think that's the tough part is like we just lead with what we're against and what we're not. What this isn't. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. Instead of saying, hey, this is the heart of God. This is what it is, right? So I'll give you an example. Very flawed metaphor, okay? But just follow along. Okay?
Bring it on.
It's a very flawed metaphor. So I'm into fitness. You know that. I like to work out. I like to strength train. My son, who's 6, knows what macronutrients are. My son knows what he needs to eat to put on muscle, right? He knows protein is one of those things that he needs to eat. So I'm not here yelling at him about ice cream and sugar and how bad that stuff is. I'm telling him this is what you need to do if you say you want to go to the Olympics one day, which is, by the way, what he told me last night. He wants to go to the Olympics. We were watching the Olympics. He was in our hotel room, getting down, stepping, and sprinting across the room because he said he's going to be a sprinter at the Olympics, right? And I said,
that's awesome.
Cool. Just so you know, that's the best of the best of the best. You're going to work really hard, and you're going to have to eat right, and you're going to have to do all these things. So in telling someone how to transform their life, how to get aligned with your fitness, I think sometimes people just go, you got to cut out all the junk. People don't even have a context for what junk is. There's people that are like, junk? Bread? I love bread is good. Bread is healthy for you. No, it's not.
Bread makes you fat?
Right? Yeah. A lot of people don't know that, right? Or like, I got to cut out sweet tea, right? We're in the South.
Yeah.
Sweet tea. I love sweet tea. It's like, there's a lot of sugar in sweet tea, right? So instead of saying, let's cut all these things out. These things are bad. These things are bad. These things are bad. These things are bad. Let me educate him on what is good for him and what's healthy for him and what's beneficial. And I think in that process, we'll get to that stuff when we have to get to that stuff as his advancement goes. So if we're going, hey, I want to get healthy. Okay, hey, you want to get healthy? More chicken, more green food. That. Higher protein, higher greens. You eat that, you're going to get healthy. And then we can get into the deductive reasoning of what you can and can't have as you get further along in that process and you have more capacity to understand. If you were to say, hey, man, I want to be sub 10% body fat, it's completely different than someone that's like, dude, I just want to lose some weight. You want to lose some weight, eat some chicken and some greens. You're going to lose some weight. Be more active. For the person that's trying to get to sub 10%, we're going to have to get into the minutia as your capacity to understand. So what I'm saying is my son's capacity, once he understands more, then we're going to have to get into the minutia of like, here are some things that we just don't do, and this is why. So if you're trying to get sub 10% body fat, again, very flawed metaphor, so forgive me. If you're trying to get sub 10% body fat, you can't ever have pizza, right? Like unless you've been to sub 10% body fat, you're a professional athlete, you live at an elite level all the time, you strength train and train for a living, you can have pizza. Most people who want to get the you're never having pizza. It's out of the cards for you. It's just not in the cards if you want to operate on that level as you get more capacity, right? And so I think it's the same way with anything else. You got to let people's capacity to understand something get into the heart of things. And it doesn't mean we don't take a stand and we don't say, hey, generally speaking, pizza is really bad for you. Like you probably shouldn't have a lot of it. And I think we just go for that instead of saying, hey, what is the objective of what we're trying to get to? What is the heart of what we're trying to get to? Oh, you want to follow Jesus? Okay, here are Jesus' expectations for marriage. One man, one woman. And that means everything outside of that isn't Jesus' expectation for that, right? That means hooking up, that's bad, right? That means sleeping around. That means having multiple partners. That means, so many different things that are outside of God's heart, and we just go for the LGBTQ question. And it's like, yeah, that's bad too, but there's all these other things that are normative in church that we look the other way towards and we don't ever address. And that's the thing, that word sexual immorality in the scriptures is porneia. It's a junk drawer term. It's like all these things, fornication's bad, adultery's bad, this is bad. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to say porneia as a junk drawer term just in case you figure out some other way to fit in some other sin that I haven't addressed yet. I'm going to create a junk drawer term and call it porneia, sexual immorality. Just here's God's heart.
Yeah, and I think that when you talk about that, like a lot of what I see here in Orlando, you see it everywhere here, is like a parent taking their little boy, we'll say 2 years old, to the Disney store and buying him a dress. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, is this 2-year-old really asking the parent, like, hey, can I be a princess? Or is that parent really trying to like push what the parent believes in on that child?
That's weird.
And I mean, I've seen it a lot. I worked in the Disney store, and it's just kind of like what's popular in Orlando right now. It's like the Orlando culture is like pushing, you know, my child can be any gender they want. And I'm like, okay, but at 2, at 3, like if your kid's not bringing it up to you, then why are you like forcing it on your child?
I think that's when you're so open minded that your brain falls out. You just do dumb stuff. Like I'm just
yeah, exactly. Well, talking about dumb stuff, you were speaking about the Olympics, and I don't know if you heard this. I think it was a meme, and it was talking about what if the Olympics was like jury duty, where random people got selected for the Olympics, and then you had a month or 2 to train.
That would be amazing.
That would be entertaining.
That would be entertaining.
I mean, we would all have a chance then. And you're just like,
cool.
oh, what am I doing? Oh, I'm doing high dive. Oh, shoot!
Yeah,
Like
I got a month.
Yeah. Okay. Something that I'm curious about, because I think a lot of men in this world are raised with a father figure that is either disconnected, not around, they've never met their father, or maybe he's just kind of like not the best dude. You talk about parenting and marriage in a way that makes me believe that you're crushing it. Like you're winning the gold medal for fathering and for being, you know, husband. And so I'm curious because your father wasn't really around in your life. So like, how did you go from fatherless to being like number 1 dad of the year?
Well, one, I don't think I'm the number 1 dad or
Well,
the
I've
dad of the
already,
year.
I've already given you the award. You can't give it
gold
back.
medal for parenting. Goodness gracious. I think, well, me and my dad are in a much better place now. He wasn't there when I was young, and we've since reconciled, and we're in a really cool spot. We have a really cool relationship now.
I love that.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that I'm the number 1 anything in terms of parenting. I think parenting is very difficult and it can be very complicated to navigate those waters. I think in terms of how I've been able to thrive or to have some normalcy, honestly, to bring it back, like the local C church. Like I've been in a church where I've seen amazing fathers, people that were fathers to me, mentors to me, that have given me an example of how to be a father. And if it wasn't for the local C church, I probably wouldn't be able to navigate a lot of these waters. So I think being fathered is how you learn to father. And if I wasn't in a local C church, I probably wouldn't have been fathered. And I don't mean in this weird, like, I'm your spiritual father, right? But I mean being discipled, having older men in your life, people that ask you hard questions. And I still, to this day, need to be fathered. I need guidance. I need people to check in on me. I need these things. And I have people in my life that are older that are that for me in different ways. And I think that relationship helps me understand how to have that dynamic with my son, because it's this thin line of like, you're not his friend, right? But you're also not God. Like you're not like all authoritative to him, right? There's this balance, right? And and unlike God, you make mistakes, and you can be angry and sometimes say things that I said that too harshly, or I got to apologize to him, and I apologize to my son when you know what, I'm sorry, that came out wrong. Hey, I didn't mean that. No, you're right. I wasn't listening to you when you said this. And I think that requires a ton of humility, but that requires examples, and I wouldn't have had those examples if it wasn't for my local church.
Yeah, that's amazing, and kind of like bringing it back full circle. I think we got time for one last question, and this is something that anybody listening, whether they be just married or maybe they have kids, like what is something practical that a couple listening in to this podcast or watching this YouTube video or here on Instagram Live that they can either start doing or stop doing to make their marriage or make their family better?
I think you can start something as simple as starting to do an activity you both enjoy together. Again, for us, it's Netflix, dude. We got
What are you watching?
We're watching Manifest right now. So it's not crazy, but it's good. We're on season 2.
Okay.
And then my buddy Alan Parr recommended All American. So we're gonna check out All American. After that, we watch Blacklist. We binged there's a lot of seasons in Blacklist. Blacklist, Law and Order, SVU. So right now, Manifest probably going to start All American after. So we've always binged shows together. That's our thing, and so I think finding something that you can do together where you're genuinely interested in it and you're at least in physical proximity. Because a lot of times it could just be weird. We are like, we're going to work on our marriage. Let's sit down and ask each other these 10 questions about how you're doing. And it's like, whoa, this feels super robotic and weird, and right? But I think just proximity and finding something that you both love to do together. And for us, that's also, my wife just did our version of Vacation Bible School at our church. And I helped with that. I did one of the camps for that. So because I'm a big personality, a lot of times she's helping me with stuff, whether it's business or whatever, but serving her in that way. Like, this is your thing. You're super passionate about it. You're organizing the entire thing. And I'm going to do a camp for basketball. And it was like an hour-long camp for the week, every day. It was super fun. She does these like children's musicals, and I do sound for the actual production for those, right? So like doing something that she's into and serving her in that way, I think has been helpful, because I'm like, and then you develop a heart for it. You're like, man, this is super dope. Initially, it's like, the obligation. I'm gonna do this because you asked me to do it. But then it's like, dude, this is rad. Like, I actually love doing this. This is super fun, right? So again, when you learn to love what you do, then you get to do what you love in other areas of your marriage.
Yes.
And so, man.
I love that you're like mixing beats for these kids at VBS.
Dude, it's fun.
And teaching them basketball. Like, do these kids realize that they have Ruslan?
No. And that's another thing, is like serving for those folks that are creatives, have personalities, doing big stuff, music, whatever. Having an outlet to serve and you not be the guy. Is so healthy. I mean, even if it's just serving kids is one thing, but cleaning bathrooms in your church, stacking chairs, doing something where you're not the guy, I think is very healthy for people's ego who are emerging and exploding and all that. I wish every Christian rapper was a part of a church plant where they had to pull up every week and set up the chairs and set up the sound and really serve the kids. I think it's very therapeutic.
Yeah. Call it Vessel of Hip Hop.
Hello.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Where can our listeners and viewers find you, find your music, find your YouTube, find it all?
Yeah, it's just Ruslan KD on all platforms. If you search Ruslan, most times when you Google Ruslan, I think I'll come up. But RUSLANKD, that's the YouTube, that's the Instagram, Twitter, all the above.
Awesome. And you've been a part of a couple music groups. So if they're looking for your like collaborative music, would they find you under?
If they search Ruslan on my Spotify, it'll actually take them to all the collaborative projects I've done. I did a record with Paul Russell. I did The Breaks. I did Dream Junkies. So quite a few things there.
Amazing, man. Well, It's been a pleasure having you here in the studio. For everyone listening in, thank you. Stay young, stay married, but definitely stay Christian.
Amen.
Hey y'all, we hope you loved this conversation. Here at Young Married Christian, we are on a mission to see a gospel-centered home made available for every single child in the foster care system. There are 400,000 kids in the foster care system, and there are 400,000 churches in America. Wow, that is crazy. This is absolutely a solvable problem, and we want to be a part of it. If you want to join us in that mission, text the word freedom to 833-370-1610.
833-370-1610. 833-370-1610.
I just did it.
And another thing you can do that is really helpful is to smash the like button on this video.
Smash it like Satan's face. Crush it like it's Lucifer's head.
It really helps us a ton, so smash that like button, subscribe to this channel.
That's it.
Smash the like button on this video.